Chapter 21, Appearances aren't the only thing that change. X. The scene was like a Mexican standoff. Ichigo and Lily hover in the air with the latter slowly reaching for her sword while the former still directed his glare towards the silver-haired boy. Toshiro slowly reached for his Zanpakuto, glare still present. Any sudden moments and we rush in. He whispered to his two teammates. Renji nodded, a hand already on his sword. Oh shit, what is it with this tension I'm sensing between these guys? IBA felt like he was out of the loop. There was definitely some business that both Renji and Toshiro wanted to finish with the Arrancar captain, and he wasn't the only one who noticed. Lily felt it too. Nay, Ichigo, you do remember what we're supposed to do, right? She felt as her words seemed to loosen up the tension a bit. We're here to take the hollow back with no unnecessary fighting. Okay. He nodded once without looking at her and that started making her feel worried. Ichigo, she spoke his name softly and wrapped her pinky with his. Our promise. That simple act got Ichigo to look at her. Right. Ichigo smiled and nodded with much vigor. Feeling her friend going back to normal, Lily smiled back too. Good, she pulled out from Ichigo's hand and turned to taunt the group of Shinigami with a simple Akanbi gesture. Sorry you can't play with me boys, but don't worry, my captain will keep you busy. Watching the girl rush towards the hollow's direction, Toshiro called out Renji to go after her when Ichigo stopped the redhead by firing a bala near his feet. I wouldn't do that if I was you. Lowering down his arm, Ichigo smirked and said. I'm not the same as I was 2 years ago. You're going to need all the help that you can get to stop me. For demonstration, Ichigo let free his Ryatsu. The Arrancar's Ryatsu appeared in multicolors of red, white, blue and black, leaving Renji and IBA stunned, not just because of the power behind it, but how stupidly beautiful Ichigo's Ryatsu looked, but not to Toshiro. No, the boy was scared because the only time he saw those colors before was when Ichigo would transform into his demonic form. This is bad. He looks towards the other two Shinigami and softly scoffed, he understands the look on their faces, he won't deny it that the first time he saw the Arrancar's Ryatsu it made him feel like a kid looking at fireworks, but as he now knows of the Hollow's powers, this meant something bad for them. 2 years, just like me, Ichigo has been training too and possibly he learned how to control his resurrection. Renji, IBA, this is bad news for us. Hearing Lieutenant Hitsugaya, Renji gathered his thoughts back together. How bad is it? Bad enough that we'll probably end up like Lieutenant Omida. The fact he could talk about Omida's death with little to no woe for the fallen man, Renji thought it was cold for Toshiro to act like that or if the situation was truly that bad for them. What's the plan then? Toshiro didn't rush or encourage a battle. 2 years ago he would have taken less time to think about his choice and gone straight into action, but things were different now, he was different. So while he was desperate to find and kill Zangetsu, his mind wasn't driving through a tunnel view. Besides defeating Zangetsu, he needed to be sure that the situation was controllable. So as he looked around the city, he realized that these weren't any proper circumstances for a battle to break off. A barrier was definitely up, no doubt the 12th divisions were just as ready and expecting a battle but with chaos running down the streets because the Hollow had caused a scene by chasing after the girl, this would be a horrible time for them to fight. If they battle, hundreds of humans may either die or may get spiritual influence, both of them are bad cases and although he was fine by letting one human die, the girl the Hollow was chasing after, but having hundreds die when the situation was avoidable, it wasn't something he was allowing to happen again. The silver-haired boy took another minute to think before finally making a choice. Are you here to take the Hollow back to Hueco Mundo? He questions Ichigo. Ichigo was more than a little surprised that Captain Hitsugaya didn't start things off with a battle. Maybe, he crossed his arms over his chest. But does that matter to you? You're supposed to purify us Hollows, Captain Hitsugaya. The two men flanking Toshiro's side looked like they wanted to cut things first and then ask questions later. I mean, those two look like they want to do just that. Toshiro looked at both adults. Renji and Iba seemed to be ready to jump at the Arrancar at any cue. Don't misunderstand the situation, Arrancar, slaying you is still our top priority, but, he looked down at the streets and then back to Ichigo. I won't take any unnecessary casualties by trying to do so. Ichigo looked down too and noticed the commotion. Too many people were running around the place, looking confused and scared with what was happening. He searches for Lily and senses her close to the hollow. Sheesh, what is she waiting for? Before anything could be said, Yoruchi appeared right next to his left side, returning to her human form. He scowls at the werewolf as she appears in her birthday suit before him. Are you a nudist or something, Yoruchi-san? A second later and his senses picked up Rudborn's Ryatsu appearing out of the blue. Finally helped. Another second pass and he senses as the Shinigami captain appeared next to their lieutenants. Well, isn't this just great? Your fault, kid. Yoruchi crossed her arms in front of her bust. I had them distracted and far away from here before you released some of your Ryatsu and they did an entire 180. She turned to the Shinigami party. Renji is without doubt distracted by what he was seeing but the rest seemed to be on a more serious attitude although she could see Captain Yukitake and Iba slightly blushing. Which reminds me. She looks over at Ichigo to see the boy not reacting one bit. Are you feeling okay, Ichigo? Huh, the redhead cocked an eyebrow. I'm feeling fine, why? Yoruchi unfolded her arms and posed for Ichigo with her chest sticking out a bit more than usual, an arm covering both her nipples and her other hand slowly running down her stomach with her right leg up a bit to hide her womanhood from Ichigo's eyes. The simple, seductive pose would have gotten a reaction out of Stark. She did it plenty of times to the king of Hueco Mundo but Ichigo didn't seem so easily flustered. In fact, he looks a bit annoyed. What the hell, kid? She tried another pose, but the results were still the same. No reaction. Really? She put her hands on her hips with her chest bare for Ichigo to see, but the teen had been keeping eye contact the whole time. Are you done? 'Cause, we're in a serious problem right now. Ichigo's left brow started twitching as Yoruchi pointed a finger at him. This is more serious. Why are you looking at my eyes when you should look at my body right now? Another twitch and Ichigo pinched the bridge of his nose with his eyes closed. Kami, why did my first mission turn out like this? Looking back at the Shinigami, he almost felt like he should apologize to them. Is no one going to attack us? We're wide open, you know. Don't change the subject because I bet if Lily did something like that you would ogle her. That got a reaction. She could see as Ichigo picture a mental image of Lily doing the same pose as her before his face. Went crimson. Oh, come on. While those two were having an useless argument, Suifong leaned closer to her second seat. Lieutenant Hitsugaya, what's the situation? We were trying to get some questions answered from Zangetsu before Yoruchi and all of you appeared. The boy answers. Well, we sense Zangetsu's Ryatsu and rush back. Captain Yukitake said. Truthfully, we were expecting a battle already breaking out. Toshiro won't lie to himself that he was deeply hoping for something like that. Thankfully, the situation didn't rise to something like that or else Captain Commander Yamamoto wouldn't be too happy with what may happen to these humans. The 13th Division captain smiled at the boy. Good call, Lieutenant Hitsugaya. The question remains about what we should do now. Captain Kamamura said before following up. I'll agree with Lieutenant Hitsugaya's manner that a fight in the middle of busy hours here in the human world may end badly. Sensing another hollow, the 7th Division captain looked down towards the chaos to see a giant hollow that resembles a tree sprout from the ground before using its branch-like arms to restrain the far smaller hollow. The green-haired Arrancar seems to be happy to see the other hollow too. What should we do? Captain Yukitake couldn't help but look at the scene with so much hope. This felt as though the question that slept at the back of his mind got answered. He looked towards the redhead Arrancar, Zangetsu-san. Are you taking the hollow back to Hueco Mundo? He kindly asked. Zangetsu at first looked at him with narrowed-down eyes, inspecting if there was a trick question behind his question. My job is to take back any hollows that appeared in the human world back to where they belong. Will he become another one of your soldiers for your army? Both of Ichigo's eyebrows jumped to his hairline. Was it possible that Shinigami learned of the current conflict inside Hueco Mundo? He didn't see how he should answer the man's question, but this man felt different. He wasn't asking questions to get the answers that Soul Society seemed to want to know, but he also seemed to ask questions for a personal reason, and his eyes seemed to gleam with some hope. Hope for something, but for what? When Lieutenant Hitsugaya asked the same question as this man, he shrugged it off and ignored his question, and he could have done the same to this man too, so why didn't he? He uncrosses his arms and answers back. We don't have any soldiers or an army. We have citizens and a government. His mind was racing against the excited tempo of his heartbeat. A government? These Arrancar have created a government for what he must assume were the hollows of Hueco Mundo. How do you run your government? Do the hollows still try to eat each other even though there might be a rule against it? Are there possibly more Arrancar that are keeping control of Hueco Mundo? This was it. This was the moment Yucatec was waiting for. Years ago he spoke to his best friend about the possibility of forming some sort of treaty between them and the Arrancar. A way to have peace between both races. A second later he realized that his colleagues were looking at him with a scowl on their faces. Probably had to do with the excited look on his face and the tone of his voice. At first, Ichigo said nothing. He wouldn't have minded telling the man more, but seeing as though they're enemies, and although he wishes that at least one Shinigami could see what sort of people they are, the situation could turn ugly fast. He leaps back and taps the air to open a garganta, his action finally getting the Shinigami to react, but things were already too late for them. Down below he could already sense Lily opening a gate towards Hueco Mundo and was already walking inside it with Rudborn following behind her with the smaller hollow wrapped by his tree-like arms. Yoruchi had already jumped into the portal and was heading towards the other end of the tunnel. He steps in and turns his head to see every Shinigami, except for Captain Yucatec, rushing towards him with their weapons raised. We're only trying to live a normal life, Shinigami-san. Toshiro reached the portal just a second after closing, and out of anger, he slashed the air. Damn it! He cursed quietly under his breath and turned to look at the older, white-haired man. Why asked such questions for Captain Yucatec? Lily sighed a breath of relief as the garganta closed behind her. And we're safe. She looks towards Rudborn to see him wrap his branches around the hollow tighter. You made my job a lot easier back there. She walked closer to see that the Naga-like hollow's mask had broken from his top right corner. She could see half the face of a man with brown hair and eyes. What's this? Leaning closer, Lily saw the way his hollow mask repaired itself by gathering the erasure from the platform that they were standing on. Well, isn't he an interesting hollow? She told Rudborn, the hollow adding more strength to his grip. The more the mask seems to complete, the stronger he's getting. Before the mask would fully be repaired back, Lily reached inside a pocket on her vest and pulled out a single yellow Arrancar FP. Can you keep his mouth open? Smaller branches started spreading from the Ajucha's appendages before they slipped into the man's mouth and kept it open. She thanked him and slipped one of the yellow pills inside the man's mouth. The effects happen in an instant. The hollow stopped resisting and calmed down before ending up limp in Rudborn's arms. Well, he'll be out for some time now. I have no idea what sort of effects they could have on a normal hollow. So hopefully nothing too bad will happen to him. Taking a better look at the man's face, she could see how the mask had stopped repairing. Now we need to head back home. As Rudborn nodded back, she started walking while asking the hollow a question. Hey, what were you doing in the human world already? Captain Kurosaki had asked me to be the only one to watch Karakura town. I can hide my presence underneath the city and control my Ryatsu to where Shinigami may mistake me for a spiritually aware human. Also, thanks to my ability, I can create my drones and have them go back to La Estrella to update Captain Kurosaki about any changes. He now realized that it was only him, her, and the hollow. Seems like Captain Ichigo took a different route to La Estrella. She almost missed that fact. I almost forgot about that. I was a bit worried that the Shinigami had tried to attack us instead. She kept walking towards the other end of the tunnel with a smile on her face. I'll see him in a second. Besides, just because he's not here with me doesn't mean I won't see him when we reach the other side of the Garganta. Then her smile dropped. Unless he goes to Minos Park to find out about the Jillian that have been attacking our farms recently. But he wouldn't do that alone. He promised that we'll go to Minos Park together. He promised me, right? As she tried to think back to that scene, Lily remembered that Ichigo never promised that they would go together. He said that they will go, but still it wasn't a promise. Ichigo could go to Minos Park with Yoruchi and handle the hollow together. You look troubled, Lieutenant Gingerbuck. Rudborn asked the moment he spotted the worry look on the young woman's face, and honestly this was the perfect opportunity to learn more about the relationship between his captain and lieutenant. Is the thought of Captain Kurosaki being away from you troubling? Lily's cheeks reddened, and she couldn't control her voice as she stuttered. Hoo-ha. Ichigo. What makes you think I was thinking about Ichigo? She presses her lips together and looks away from the hollow, hiding what's for sure her entire blushing face. Exiting the Garganta, both hollows found themselves at the center of the plaza, the street ironically buzzing with so much life. Where to now, Lieutenant? The lime-haired girl was already walking towards the science division so that Sale or Urahara could check in on the hollow's health. She was walking silently, but the thought that Rudborn figured out her trouble started nagging the back of her mind, and the voice inside her head wasn't helping one bit. Is because you filled your mind with Ichigo this, Ichigo that, Ichigo when. Ichigo, Ichigo, Ichigo. That's how they know what you're thinking. There's nothing special about that boy. So stop thinking about him, because guess what, he's not thinking about you. She never had tried talking back to the voice. The words she always heard made her believe she was having a mental conflict with herself. The negative thoughts she had about Ichigo started feeling like she was trying to find a self-reason to why she couldn't imagine herself with Ichigo in the form of a relationship she's desperately hoping for. Something that goes deeper than their friendship and more into the zone of romance. Shut up. And if she's hoping to reach that level, she needs to silence the voice in her head that filled her mind with uncertainty and her heart with cowardice, because if she can't, how will she ever have the courage to tell Ichigo about how she feels towards him? Shut up. You know nothing. If Ichigo never thinks about me, then he wouldn't need to listen to me, look at me or talk to me. She clenched her hands into fists. The way he looked at me during his ceremony is the same way I look at him. Filled with so much warmth, caring, and love. Love. The high school feeling that she felt towards Ichigo wasn't a crush. What she feels towards him went deeper, and it was love. She loves Ichigo. You make me feel so happy. From the first day we met, you have always been there to make me smile and laugh. Not once, after my death, did I feel like I was dead. Not when you were there to always make me feel alive. The words he spoke to her about how she made him feel. The way she wanted him to express the strange feeling he couldn't quite figure out was the same feeling she had felt towards him. Since the first day he got introduced into her life, Ichigo had slowly become her reason for being alive, for even existing now. He was her happiness. Her life only had meaning before because she's meant to only fill Stark's lonely life, but as time passed by and Stark's loneliness started getting filled up by the companionship of other different people, she thought her existence didn't matter anymore. But Ichigo had said otherwise. If I had lost you, I think I wouldn't know how to keep going. I know it sounds stupid to say that when I still would have had Stark and Sale with me, but you gave me an emotion I probably wouldn't have ever felt. If she would have died, then the love that Ichigo felt for her would have died. He would lose the foreign emotion forever, but what's important was that Ichigo loves her too. She bloomed the warm feeling in his heart, and if something was to happen to him, then the warmth he left in her heart would forever vanish too. If she ever lost that warmth, then she would never have another reason to be alive. That idiot loves me. Her body went straight to a trip to Cloud 9 after realizing that Ichigo felt the same way towards her. It wasn't a simple one-way mutual feeling. Both of them felt the same towards the other, only that Ichigo hadn't figured out what the feeling was. Do you think hollows could love each other? The question caught Rudborn off guard. He almost skipped a step and tripped over. Whether she noticed, Lily kept on walking. Could it be? He hurried back but walked a bit faster to be by her side and looked at the young woman from the corner of his eyes to see the small smile on Lily's face. She was even ignoring his gaze. He turned his head to look at her now, trying to make her aware of his presence but realized that she was expecting an answer from him. Well, but he won't answer her question with the obvious answer she wanted to hear. He still needs her to confess the feelings herself. I like to believe we can. We all love Stark as our king, the rest of the captains and lieutenants. Even the Shinigami and Vizards in fact spite that some of us still don't trust or like them. Lily smiled. That's not what I meant by love. What I'm trying to say is if we deepen our bond, could we love each other? Rudborn waited a few seconds to see if the lieutenant would have tried to rephrase her wordings by not making it obvious that she had grown feelings for Ichigo. Something tells me that you two have already deepened that bond. Yeah, we have. Surely she must have realized that she openly admitted her feelings for Ichigo. Again he waited, but Lily didn't seem to care any more about it. The smile on her face she held hasn't changed to anything else. So, Captain Kurosaki, huh? For the first time, he heard her giggle. Things were that obvious? Both of you have been obvious lately. During the ceremony, everyone saw the way Ichigo looked and held you. Even today at the human world I saw the way you calmed him down with the simple action of a pinky hold. He held his stare the whole time he was talking to Lily, but she only softly laughed. You were right, Lilinette-sama. Hearing the honorific, Lily looked up to the Ajuchas with a tiny frown. You can drop the honorific, we're friends. But... Rudborn stopped as Lily playfully slapped his branch leg. It's fine, trust me. Besides, hearing that sort of title in my name makes me feel like I'm important when I'm really not. I'm just another hollow like all of you. She saw the hollow nod and said, you said I was right. Right about what? About how Captain Kurosaki only listens to you. If our roles were reversed, I wouldn't have been able to convince Captain Kurosaki from not fighting the Shinigami. Now that Lily openly admitted her feelings for Ichigo, he's curious about a couple of things. Lily, can I ask you a few questions? The Limonette smiled softly, happy that Rudborn dropped the honorific. Is it about me and Ichigo? That's right. He saw her shrugged her shoulders and that signaled him to ask the questions. For how long have you and Captain Kurosaki been together for? Rudborn stops at his tracks when Lily starts laughing a little sheepishly. Are you two not together like that? She nervously started rubbing the back of her head, not looking at him in the eyes. But the rumors always spoke about the secret love affair that you and Captain Kurosaki hide from Stark-sama. He wasn't and didn't want to bring up the rumors, but since Lily had now confessed to having feelings for Ichigo, he thought it was possible that they first started off as simple friends with benefits before things finally got serious between the two of them. Does Stark-sama know about you two? Hearing about Stark, Lily wonders what her brother/father figure would think of it. Would Stark approve of their relationship? Now that their souls are no longer one, would Stark let her have a well-deserved self-life with her own made choices? Well, it's not like Stark controlled her life before Ichigo came crashing down on them. In fact, they both never lived a life because even after their original form split into two souls, Stark was still too powerful for any regular hollow, and those who could have possibly lived among them avoided them because of their power. So neither she nor Stark could live any sort of normal lives, and the only thing they had was each other. From the start, their relationship was mostly that of a symbiotic bond in which Stark wouldn't have been able to survive his solitude without her. Even then that wasn't enough for them, it was still only them two. Time went by as they lived alone, but it wasn't like they wasted their time. They tried figuring out the limits their bodies had, and that's when she learned that Stark was more powerful than her by milestones. Zero, Sonido, Hierro, Stark knew how to do all of that naturally while she only could use a weak Zero that was just as strong as a Jillian's. It was during that realization that Stark knew that he had to protect her, because if something happened to her, he would go back to living alone, and because of that, she never mentally grew out from the thought that her only reason for being alive was to be Stark's only company. So their symbiotic bond later evolved into a brother-slash-sister sort of relationship, but then that took a new dynamic after they both became separate souls living their own lives, but that didn't stop Stark from evolving their bond into that of a father-slash-daughter relationship. The change was barely noticeable for her since Stark got only overprotective. But, if she gets to get together with Ichigo, would Stark interfere? What would he do? Her smile and shoulders dropped with a bit of her enthusiasm. I don't know. I'm sure work has kept him busy lately, and I have been spending most of my time around with Ichigo and here at the plaza. So I haven't even talked to him about it. Then there's me and Ichigo. We're not even that close at a relationship yet. I just figured out my emotions while Ichigo hasn't even figured out the feeling yet. Are you saying that Ichigo doesn't feel the same towards you? That's not it. We're both feeling the same way towards each other, but it's just that Ichigo hasn't figured out that what he's feeling towards me is love. Lily looks up to see the start of the staircases that lead towards Escudos. It's been 6 years now since Stark and I met Ichigo. She turned to look at Rudborn. Do you think that's a long enough time for him to grow feelings towards me? What if I'm reading things all wrong and he only cares about me like some sort of sister? Lily stopped midway up the stairs to think again. 6 years. Was that long enough time for feelings to grow between them? What if the feeling that Ichigo felt for her was different? What if she was right? What if Ichigo only saw her as a sister? Ugh, where am I? The new voice caught her attention, and she turned around to see the warp hollow in Rudborn's arms lift its head. Are you okay? The hollow reached for his head with his arm before stopping and looked at his hand. What is this? The disoriented voice mixed in with his normal one, which until now, the hollow finally realized. What's wrong with my voice? He looks at his monstrous-looking arms. What happened to me? You're a hollow now. Lily watched Rudborn put down the hollow before it lost its balance and fell down. Where are my legs? Lily saw a scared and confused look in the hollow's human eye. You're a hollow now. Her words seemed to confuse and scare the hollow even more. What the hell is a hollow? Where am I? He tried standing back up by lifting his upper body before he dropped back down. I don't understand, the last thing I remember was. Then he stopped trying. I was hurting her. I'm sorry, Orihime. The Limonette looked at Rudborn and he looked back at her with no clue what to do, so she walked up to the hollow and patted his giant arms gently. Is Orihime a girl with orange hair? He nodded, and she kindly smiled. You were chasing after her in the streets of Karakura town before we stopped you. Don't worry, she's okay. Do you remember your name? Inoue Sora. They stayed there for a while until Sora figured out how to move. Using his giant arms, Sora lifted his upper body and walked up the stairs behind Rudborn and Lily, the girl once in a while turning around to see how he was doing. A few minutes later, they were at the second level of La Estrella. Until now the hollow hadn't asked about where he was, but up till this point he was finally curious to ask. You're now in Hueco Mundo, where thousands or perhaps millions of hollows live. You're inside the city of La Estrella that's inside a mountain. Rudborn turned around to look at Sora. For a bit of detail, we're at the second floor of La Estrella where it holds our military power and government, escudos. Down below us is the first floor and a local spot for any regular or abnormal hollows, the plaza. And above us is the third floor where the Arrancar, Vizards and Shinigami live. Sora looked at the gigantic church-like structure in awe. Does Hueco Mundo have more places like this? Sadly, as things are now, you won't find any other place like this, and until the war with Barragan is over, La Estrella won't expand. Expecting for the man to ask about who's Barragan, Rudborn added, as for who is Barragan, he used to be the old king of Hueco Mundo before Stark-sama came, and although he defeated Barragan, he didn't kill him. So Stark did all of this? Sora looks at Lily pushing a giant white wooden door with a moon sculpture in it. Stark didn't do everything himself. Someone already built this place. Not by us, I can tell you that much. Also, we have people who had the experience to design how our military work, while I and Yoruchi-san are building up our government's fundamentals. Lily found herself in a hallway with 5 different pathways. There were images of each division's section up above them. From left to right there was a pink feather, the science division. A black shield with a white hourglass in the middle, the police force and the information center. A gray star, Stark's division. A green bat, the communication division, and finally the last one was a silver moon. She was curious and wanted to see if their division got finished, but decided how that little moment needed to be shared between her and Ichigo. Sora follows behind his escorts as they head into the hallway with a pink feather. Stark must be an amazing person. No, Stark's still a lazy ass. The only reason he's doing his job is because of people like Ulquiorra, and I keep bossing him around, but sometimes he works without us telling him what to do. She turns around with a smile and puts her arms behind her back. That's right, we haven't introduced ourselves yet, have we? The big guy there is Rudborn and I'm Lillinette Gingerbuck. She turned back around and walked around the next corner to see some members of sales divisions checking on some of their equipment. As soon as they saw her, they stopped to bow before going back to work. Sora watched as every hollow who saw them stopped working and bowed to the girl. Rudborn saw and explained it to Sora. They're just showing their respect to the princess. Princess. Sora gaped and turned to Rudborn before going back to see Lily smiling, waving and talking with a few of the hollows. Is she the king's daughter? No, but with how I have seen them interact, they seemed a lot like a father and daughter, but truthfully they're brother and sister. Sora looked at the back of the head of the supposed princess. He and Orihime had a similar relationship like Stark and Lily, while they were brother and sister, he took care of her as if she was a daughter to him. That sadly happens because of the environment they grew up in. A drunken father and a prostitute mother who always argued raised them and beat them. He did his best to shield Orihime from their wrath. As things got worse in the household, he started fearing that their parents would kill Orihime, so when he turned 18, he ran away with Orihime and raised her from then on like a daughter. Then came the day when he died, and instead of passing on he stood behind and watched over her, listening to her prayers, but then things changed when she stopped coming. When she came, she talked about a friend she made, but, while he's supposed to be happy for her, he started feeling hurt that Orihime would forget about him that easily. So he became lonely and resentful to the friend who took away his little sister from him. And that led to his transformation. I'm curious to learn how you two live your lives. Reaching the main room, Lily pushed the doors open to see that Sale and Urahara were finally back. You guys finally came to do your job. She told them in a deadpan tone. It's so good to see you again, Lily-chan. Urahara joyfully responded. Sale-kun and I have been working hard on our latest project and we're finally happy to announce that we're finished. We already told Stark-sama about it and he wants to see if it works. Sale pushed up his glasses out of habit. So we would like for you and Ichigo to come by tomorrow afternoon. It'll be quite the show. His smile rose an inch when he saw the hollow behind Lily and made his way towards him. Well, hello, what do we have here? He tilts his head left and right and leans closer to see the hollow's broken mask and human face better. Isn't he interesting? Urahara couldn't help but agree too. I'll say, it looks like you found yourself a very interesting friend here, Lily. Seeing the hollow uncomfortable by having Sale so close to him, he couldn't help but smile with a goofy look on his face. His strength is nowhere near to an Ajucha's, or a Jillian. Sale knew where Urahara was heading towards and he couldn't hide his excitement. So he's a regular hollow that hasn't gone through a single stage of evolution. He's so docile too when he should try to feed on other hollows to evolve. He looks at Lily and suspects what she had done. Don't tell me you fed him one of the Arrancar's pills to him. Well, yeah. She raises an eyebrow. They're supposed to be for hollows to control their hunger, are they not? On Ajucha's level hollows, not at such low tiers. Urahara looked toward Sora with his signature fan covering half his face. Are you hungry by any chance? Sora hasn't followed anything these people were talking about, but seeing normal-looking people, he wonders if perhaps he'll end up human again. I'm not. Is that good? Will I not be human again? Won't be human, but you can look like one, but there's only one way to find out. Sale's smile turns wicked with some very wrong intentions in mind. Lily noticed it right away, the look Sale would get when a new prisoner gets delivered to him. Sale, don't treat him like one of your special specimens. As of right now he's a citizen and you know of the rule that you are forced to obey. She gave the man a hard and stone look while Sale looked at her with a far too cocky smirk. A while back, she heard the stories of the sick experiments that Sale would conduct with some of Barragan's soldiers who they took as prisoners, and although she wishes to get rid of those bloodlust hollows, she doesn't want them to die in such painful deaths. She doesn't understand what caused Sale to turn like this, but he needed to understand that there were things that were off limits. When he didn't listen to her, she told Stark, but things didn't go as planned. While Stark and the rest of the captains weren't happy about it, most of them agreed that such things weren't unheard of, and with the way Barragan's army ruthlessly killed their soldiers and citizens, it was only fair they share somewhat the same or worse fate. She didn't talk to Stark for an entire week after that. That was their first ever real argument. At least Ichigo was there for her and agreed that what Sale was doing was wrong. Sale was about to open his mouth and taunt her about what could she possibly do to stop him when he senses Ichigo. Fine, I won't do such things towards him. He looks towards the doors as Ichigo walks into the room. Everyone inside the room was quiet. Lily was glaring at Sale and Ichigo wondered if it was because Sale had mentioned his twisted experiments. Is everything okay here? The young woman kept her stare on the Arrancar scientist a bit longer before looking at Ichigo. Yeah, everything is fine here. She walked towards Ichigo to only put some distance between her and Sale. Ichigo looked at Lily to Sale. The man had his back turned and was talking to a hollow, the rest of the room going back to their normal activities. Well, I'm beat. Yoruchi-san dragged me to report our mission to Stark, so I couldn't come here any sooner. He also told me how our division will be finally ready by tomorrow. There was a sort of feeling at the back of his head that told him that Lily didn't want to be here anymore. So we can head back to our apartment and wait till tomorrow. Lily walked up to him and put her forehead on his chest, looking at her feet. Hey, are you okay? He whispered to her, and he looked back around the room to see people either ignoring them or giving them some personal space. He felt as she shook her head. Do you want to talk about it in our room? A nod later and he left with a sonido. Sale looked back to the empty space and sighed. What happened to him? Why was he turning like this? Could it be his search for perfection has caused him to destroy the last remaining pieces of his humanity? Within seconds they were outside of their room. Ichigo let go of Lily to open the door before she turned around first and went in. He watched her head towards their bedroom and he walked in, locked the door behind him and followed her into their dark room to see her already face down on the bed with her legs hanging by the edge. Did you and Sale get into another argument? What do you think? Ichigo could barely understand her since she muttered into the bed sheets. He sat on the bed and looked over to the clock. The day was still new. They left to the human world around 5 and they didn't waste any kind of time. Exactly 10 minutes like Hiyori said, and then he wasted 30 minutes with Stark. Hey, he looked over his shoulders to see Lily still face down. You wanna head over to Minos Park and talk to Rose about the hollow? If you wanna go. He sighed and turned back around. Guess they won't go today, and he doesn't want to force her to come and won't go alone since he promised to bring her along with him. Lily felt Ichigo get off and wonder if she finally annoyed him to where he would leave her alone. She heard the door to their room close. Guess he'll rather leave me alone. No doubt the room was darker now with the shut door. She was planning on taking a nap when she felt an extra weight in the bed with her and she felt. As he pulled her back into his chest. What are you doing? She turns around to look at him and she finally realizes that Ichigo had removed both his coat and shirt. The only reason she didn't feel his bare chest against her skin was because of her vest. You're going to sleep, aren't you? Might as well sleep too so that tomorrow we can wake up early and do a couple of things before we head over to the stupid thing Sale and Urahara built. Ichigo nonchalantly replied. Got a problem? Well, she did. But it wasn't because of his actions. Well, yeah, she turned her body around before pointing at the other bed in the room. I'm used to always going to you first. Feels weird when you do things first. Even in this darkness, he could still see her smile. He rolled his eyes and walked towards the other bed. Okay, fine. He hops into the bed and lies on his back with an arm behind his head and the other one over his eyes. His ears heard the creaking sound of Lily getting off the bed and the loud steps her boots were leaving behind before she stops. He was about to remove his arm and look at her when his ears heard her vest drop to the floor. He stops and moves back his arm when he hears the bandages wrap around her chest drop with her boots too. Another second later and he felt as Lily lay on top of him, but there was no contact of skin to skin. Ichigo moved his arm and saw Lily wearing the shirt he took off while looking at him with a raised eyebrow. I like the smell. She already took a guess at what he was about to ask so she said it first, but then she felt like her wordings came out sounding weird. It smells like you, and living in the same room together for some time I just got used to the scent. Revealing something so weird to Ichigo, of all people, she couldn't stop herself from blushing and since she didn't want him to see her face, she hides it by pressing it against his chest. It makes me feel safe too. Makes me feel as if you're right here with me. Protecting me. That's why. I like it, because I know it's you. The confession at first was weird without a doubt to him but it felt like she was trying to confess about something else instead. That's just weird, he felt as she pressed her head deeper into his chest to hide it. But I can relate. I like it when you wrap your arms around me when we sleep since it was something my mom would do to make me fall asleep faster because it would make me feel safe. She lifts her face to look at him, trying to see if he only said something like that to make the situation less awkward, but like her, Ichigo was looking away with a bit of crimson color on his cheeks. Really? She stood up and straddled his waist, the action not feeling weird to her. They sleep together in each other's arms, and they wake up in awkward positions. So why should straddling him feel any weirder? Just like Lily, the action didn't make him nervous, but the way her eyes solely focused on him did. Yeah. Lily smiled and lay back on top of him but rested her head near his shoulders. Then she felt as Ichigo wrapped his arms around her waist and she dug her face into his neck. I like that about you. What do you mean? I see nothing that you would like in me. This was the perfect time and opportunity to confess her feelings for Ichigo in a subtext manner. I love who you are. You're not some hollow who's pretending to still be human. You're still human, even after everything you have done. I know you still blame yourself for what you did 2 years ago, but that's good. If you feel nothing, then you'll be the monster that you're afraid of turning into. I love how you're standing up for the weak, always ready to protect them, and that's just one of your many charms that I love about you. Just to get more things out of her chest, she said. I also love the color of your hair. Makes me feel happy that I'm not the only one with wacky-looking hair, and your eyes. Since the first day we met, I thought they were the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. There was something in his chest building up, he could feel it. Your hair is not wacky. Cammy, why am I going to start things off with her appearance? And if it is, then I love it. Makes me feel like there's nothing wrong with my hair color. There's more that I love besides the color of your eye. I love the way it's filled with so much kindness and warmth. There was a feeling in his chest that started building up, the one he was talking to Lily about. That's what I love about you. You're so kind to everyone you know. And you're so humbled about your status. Even though everyone knows who you are, how important you are, you don't bother showing it off. You're still you, still acting like yourself, and I love that about you. It was silent for a moment before Lily kept the conversation going. I love the fact that you never kicked me off your bed when we first started doing this. I love our pointless arguments even though they're so stupid sometimes. I love the way you looked at me when I wore the dress. I love the way you stuck close to me for the last 6 years. That's because I met no one that was like you. It was right there when Ichigo finally recognized how important he was to Lily. He was one of the very first people that she ever met after the 200 years that she lived alone with Stark, something that she had admitted to him. And to him, she was the first reason he was happy with how his life turned out to be. Lily, thank you for everything. For the first time, I'm happy with what happened to me because I got to meet you. He already found closure with his father, his mother, and finally, with himself, because if Lily could love the monster that he has become, then why couldn't he? But the happiness that he felt right now wasn't because he got to conquer his traumatic experience, it was because he finally understood the feeling. Lily, I love you. This was finally his confession, and he wasn't expecting Lily to understand, and he wouldn't blame her for it if she didn't. Her heart stopped as he spoke those words before it started racing again. You mean as a sister, right? She wanted to be sure. She didn't want any false hope. No. His voice was so quiet, and he felt broken. Was it possible that their relationship only came to her as a brother and sister only? It's okay. I won't blame her for it. And if she denies his feelings, he'll be okay with it too. So he waited for a minute before he felt as she smiled against his neck. I love you too. His heart stopped beating, and he turned to see Lily looking at with a soft smile. As a brother? He clarifies her words, trying to see if she forgot to add that last part. She shook her head and leaned closer to his face to plant a kiss on the lips of his mask. I love you. That was finally it, the feelings in his chest had exploded with the kiss, and as she moved her head back, Ichigo leaned back down to meet her lips to feel the rush of the emotion again. With the last kiss breaking off, Ichigo and Lily went to sleep together. Ichigo's inner world. The rain stopped, but the only thing remaining were the thunderous clouds. The kid almost has it down, Zangetsu said, causing the representative of Ichigo's Quincy powers to frown. Does that mean Ichigo will finally hear it? The old man asks. Zangetsu shook his head. There's one last thing that Ichigo needs to do, but for someone like him, it'll be hard to do it. After all, he's still scared of becoming a monster. The other Zangetsu spirit frowns as he looks to the cloudy sky. I hope he figures it out soon. I wish to see the sun at least once. The scorching heat of the sun made her naked and malnourished body feel as if it was ablaze, and her bare feet had finally adjusted to the hot sands. As much as she would love to take shelter inside the cave, she couldn't, not when the other person would throw her out. Her last punishment for disobeying her orders got her thrown out to the sun naked. She licks her chapped lips. Please, she could hear how weak her voice sounded. I can't take this anymore. A strand of her once healthy light green hair blocked her eye before she grabbed and looked at it. Her hair had lost most of its color, and now it seems like the color had dried out. She could see the other person's silhouette move by only an inch. At least give me something to wear. She heard the woman inside the cave groan before she came out. Her pink-eyed stare into the other girl's pink-eyed, and to her, that's where the similarities ended. She knew they were both the same person, but the older girl looked different. Her skin was white and her eye had a black scara with a pink pupil. Will you stop bitching? The older-looking Lily told the smaller and fragile-looking Lily. She only nodded once and the older Lily ripped a piece of her cloth and tossed it at her feet. She wrapped herself with it and walked behind her other self towards the cave when she bumped into something and fell back on the sand. She looks up to see Hollow Lily glare at her. You asked for clothes only. She smirked and said, but seeing how pathetic you looked out there, I started feeling bad for you, so I guess you can come in. Again she nodded and followed the other girl inside the cave where she sat on one side while the Hollow Lily took a seat on the other side of the cave. Who are we? Did I say you could talk? She glared at the girl. Talk and I'll throw you out again. The little Lily zipped her mouth and looked down at the ground. Who are we? She dug her toes deep into the cold sand and relaxed as she felt the pain in her feet fade. If there's one person who could help us, it'll be him. Fucking disgusting. She glares at the weaker Lily and digs her nails into her skin. It's your fault that I'm still stuck in here, Kurosaki. Chapter 22, Too Much in One Day. X. Hey, Lily. Ichigo looked down at the girl. After their confession it was hard for them to sleep. So far they'd been awake for the last 3 hours, not talking but enjoying each other's presence. He hears her hummed, and he asks. So, what now? About us? What do you mean? Are things going to change between us? Lily lifted herself to look at him. What are you talking about, you idiot? Nothing between us is going to change, we're still gonna be us, doing our own thing, and the only thing that changes between us will be this. She leans down to kiss him before she snuggles back to chest. It feels weird kissing him when his mask is over his lips, which means I still haven't kissed him, damn it. With the action still being new to him, Ichigo couldn't help but blush under his mask before wrapping his arms around the pouting girl. Well, that's good. I thought we would end up being like the couples that we used to see in those Spanish soap opera shows back at Urahara's place. You know, the kind that act like a lovey-dovey couple. He embarrassingly admitted. Her attitude changed as she heard him and she couldn't stop herself from laughing. Ha ha ha. Oh Cammy, you thought we would end up like that? She smirks and pokes his chest. Or maybe you're hoping for it. I remember those shows clearly. The couples always did everything they could to be alone together so they could get freaky. Blushing, Ichigo said, sure looks like we didn't see the same thing since they did none of those freaky stuff. She laughed again, and he rolled his eyes. Alright, get off already. Lily pouted but obeyed. She watched him head towards his clothes drawers and pulled out a new white shirt before moving on to put on his coat. He headed towards their living room and left her behind to get dressed too. 5 minutes later, Ichigo turned around to see Lily wearing his white shirt with her usual clothes. Are you sure you want to wear my shirt? She looks down and then back at him. Something wrong if I do? Nothing wrong, he saw her lift an eyebrow. I mean it. It's just that, we're gonna head towards Minos Park, you know. People may see you with the shirt and they will without doubt notice that's one of my shirts. Then that will get people talking and rumors are gonna spread around. Are you worried about rumors or don't want anyone to know about our relationship? The redhead wanted to say yes to both of them, but honestly it was the latter that he was more worried about. I mean, I know everyone probably saw it coming, but I feel as though Stark wouldn't approve of us. It didn't surprise Lily that they both share the same trouble thought. In the last few hours she was thinking about what Stark would do if he ever found it. If you're that worried about him, then let me handle him. No, I'll do it. I was the one that confessed to you, so I might as well be the one to tell Stark about us, too. If there was one thing that those cheesy soap opera shows had shown him about relationships, it was the boyfriend's duty to tell his girl's father/brother that he'll be dating his little daughter/sister. What's the worst he can do to me? Neutered you? Zangetsu said, making a powerful point. Stark wouldn't go that far. Ichigo mentally rolled his eyes. With a deadpan tone, the inner hollow said, you sleep, not only in the same room, but in the same bed. What's stopping Stark from thinking that you're plotting and deflowering his baby girl? Dot. Oh crap. Ichigo was about to take back his words and let Lily tell Stark when she wrapped her arms around his neck and pecked him on the cheek. You're the best, Ichigo. She grabbed his hand as she walked towards the door. Honestly, I got scared there for a minute. I thought I would be the one to tell him. Guess I shouldn't worry about it. Well, shit. The redhead couldn't say no now. Lily opened the door and he could already see Minoli and Loli waiting outside. Sheesh, do these two live outside our apartment like guard dogs? He saw their eyes land on their hands and until now, he realizes that not a single person has ever seen them holding hands together. In fact they had never held hands and now that they were doing it affectionately. Now was the moment to show Lily that he cares about her by not hiding their relationship to these two. Do you two want to get the room right next to us so that both of you don't have to sleep outside our room? Both hollows look away from the hand holding and to Ichigo, the Arrancar captain showing off a cheerful attitude in his eyes. They looked towards Lily and saw a bright smile on her face. Hilarious Captain Kurosaki, but we came to tell you that your division is finally ready. Loli said, and Minoli added. We're also here to tell you that Subdivision Captain Love has another message for you. He said they found something very interesting for you. Looks like it's time to head to Minos Park, Ichigo. That's Captain Kurosaki to you. Both sisters saw the newly formed couple playfully arguing for a bit longer before leaving through a garganta. Once the scene was over, and a few seconds passed by, Minoli turned to her sister. I think it happened. Yeah. Loli nodded and then looked at Minoli with a brief grin. On her. Wanna tell everyone about what we just saw? Or how about if you two wait until Ichigo and Lily tell anyone? Minoli and Loli turned around to see Okuiora walking out from Mashiro's apartment. Loli was about to open her mouth before shutting it. They may be in playful terms with Ichigo and Lily, but the rest of the captains and lieutenants may act a little more harsh towards her sappy attitude. She bows her head, and Minoli follows suit. Very well, Captain Cypher. As both sisters left, Mashiro poked her head from behind Okuiora's back. Did it finally happen? She saw Okuiora nod, and she grins from ear to ear. I hope it was Lily who confessed to him first because if she didn't, we lost 30,000 yen. I took my 15,000 yen and bet it on Ichigo. You'll be the one losing the other half. Okuiora coolly replied. She blinked once, twice and thrice before her brain finally grasped what the man said. Eh? She watched Okuiora close his eyes and leave her alone at the door. Okuibaka. She puffed her cheeks and closed the door. Guess that'll be the last time that she'll invite Okuiora over to her room for a while for being a jerk. Since Minos Park was so huge, because it's literally the entire world underneath them, it would have been impossible to find Love and Rose if they didn't search for them by sensing their Ryatsu, but things at Minos Park have gotten different now and it was much easier to find them. Because every farm requires a group of hollows to protect them from Barragan's men, both Vizards and Nell had a region to protect, each protecting 8 farms. As all of their food supply come from the retransformed Jillians, Sale and Urahara had built 24 farms. The farms in question weren't your typical looking human farms. In fact, it looked nothing like a farm. They were actually just giant black steel chambers with no windows, a large glass cube on top and only one door that the Jillians walk inside to. There were also no fences needed to keep the Jillians together. The creatures obeyed powerful hollows. So a pack of hollows could easily maintain a sizable group of over 200 Jillians in check, and the only thing the Ajuchas do is monitor them and protect them from any of Baragon's soldiers. Usually by the end of a 40-day cycle, 5 random Jillians in each herd get selected and guided towards the slaughterhouse, so to speak of. When the hollows enter the gigantic building, 2 members of the science division, each given instructions in how the machines work, use the computer by the door's side to convert Jillians into food pills. Ichigo and Lily walked out from the Garganta in time to see a new patch of Jillians going into one of the many machines located across Minos Park. "It's been 40 days already," Lily said out loud, but then she remembered one of Shinji's reports mentioning the rise of population in the last few months, meaning that more food was getting consumed, so they needed more. "What's the time period from the last pills process?" She looked to her left to see Ichigo leave her side and talk with Love, the Afro-Star man still wearing the same clothes. As she got closer, she could already hear them discussing something. "Yeah, I don't know if it's the same thing you have been looking for, but what we found was definitely not something anyone has ever seen," she hears Love say, and she moves to Ichigo's side. "Did you ask Gerald or Nell?" her boyfriend asked, and while she was curious to learn what they were talking about, spotting a very familiar hollow working on the computer dragged her attention and curiosity. She left Ichigo's side and made her way towards the hollow, its name on the tip of her tongue. "Roka?" As the hollow heard her name, she turned around. "Lilynette-sama, what are you doing here so late at night?" Lily moved to Roka's side, trying to catch a glimpse at how the machine operates. "Well, Ichigo and I have some business here." She notices that her presence was making the hollow feel a bit uncomfortable. "So, how does the machine work? I never got around to asking Sale or Urahara before." Not a total lie, Sale had explained it to her about how the machine operated. But he kept everything so technical and scientifically accurate that she couldn't fathom the man's explanation. The question seemed to wake up the woman from her mental haze. "You see, Lilynette-sama, these machines first separate the hollow's Ryatsu from its body, which then moves to the glass cube that you see on top of the chamber, then the machine breaks down the hollow's physical matter into its atom form, Reisher. After a few minutes, we release artificially created Reisher, which then the machine melds together into one. The artificial Reisher also carries a dose of empty Ryatsu. Once the fake and real Reisher mold into one and create the small pills you're used to seeing, we release the Ryatsu back into the chamber so that it'll fuse with the fake Ryatsu. When the fake Ryatsu comes in contact with the real Ryatsu, it will leach into one of the thousands of Ryatsu and will start imitating its power and multiply. While the imitated Ryatsu multiplied inside the pill, the quality of the pills are far more downgraded, since most of what hollows are eating are empty power that fill their stomachs." She looked towards Lily to see the girl's eye spinning in a spiral. "I'm sorry, it seems I have confused you. What part didn't you understand, Lilynette-sama?" Well, I think I got most of it down." Lily started calling out the steps with lesser details. "So first you suck the Jillian's Ryatsu and store them in the glass, then you destroy their bodies and reconstruct them back to Reisher. Then you release your fake Reisher that's also carrying fake Ryatsu, and well, that's all I can figure out. I don't understand the last part though. You said how the fake Ryatsu copies the other thousands of Ryatsu. But where did that statement come from? What thousands of Ryatsu?" Roka smiled at the princess. "Seems like that last part always confuses everyone. I didn't understand it the first time I heard it either. Captain Sailaporo and Urahara learned that all Jillians that come from a retransform Ajuchas have a unique spiritual presence. An Ajucha's Ryatsu that you sense comes from the owner's power that absorbed the other souls, and that's how you can sense only one presence instead of all the thousands of souls. However, these Jillians are different since they no longer have a conscious mind, and that causes the other souls to try taking control but won't be able to." Lily closed her eye and concentrated on sensing every hollow. Like the woman stated, all the Jillians felt as if they were carrying thousands of souls in them. "Is that how we're able to find all these special kinds of Jillians?" "That's right, Lilynette-sama. Roka presses a button, and she releases Ryatsu back into the chamber. Because of the large number of unused Ryatsu these hollows are carrying, Captain Sailaporo and Urahara created a special Ryatsu that mimics them. She puts a finger on her mask's lips and says, "If I remember right, Captain Urahara said how the Shinigami used something similar with their strange mod souls creations. To create these fake souls, they first needed Ryatsu examples to create them." "What are you two talking about?" Captain Kurosaki. The hollow bowed as the captain stood behind the princess, looking over the girl's shoulders. Not staying there for long, Lily followed Ichigo after he greeted the hollow and asked her to follow him. So after waving at the hollow she goes after him, ignoring the odd look Roka was giving her. "So what happened? What did you and Love talk about?" "The double-headed Jillian has attacked another one of our farms. However, this time it seemed to have finally picked a side." She could already guess the unpleasant news by seeing the soft frown in his eyes. "It joined Barragan's side?" Ichigo nodded. "Yeah, when they attacked the last farm, a bunch of Barragan's soldiers were with the hollow. Since we spread apart our farms to avoid constant destruction, Rose, Love and Nell couldn't reach them in time to aid them. So the farm got destroyed and there was no one left since they were all eaten by the Jillian." "I don't understand." Lily frowned as they walked deeper into the woods. "How has a single Jillian been giving everyone so many problems?" "Love actually gave me an answer to that, too. So this hollow can use the abilities of every hollow it ate. This includes Ajuchas too, and since our war has been going on for 2 years now, there's no telling how many injured and weak hollows this Jillian has preyed upon." Ichigo sadly knew that their war caused this sort of monster to be born. Now that this hollow joined Barragan's side, there'll probably be a jump on attacks. Thinking again in some of Shinji's reports, Lily hummed as she recalled some of them. "If I remember right, 9 out of the 24 farms have been attacked with only 4 out of the 9 fully destroyed. That would explain why it had been 30 days since the last time they made extra pills. We're starting to rush the production rate so that we can feed our citizens." Out of curiosity, Ichigo asked about their current population and how much food they needed. "We're easily back to 4,000 hollows. Usually the 5 groups of Jillians create between 300 and 400 pills, then you multiply that with the remaining factories. So that's 7,200 to 9,600 pills a month, but since some hollows need more food than others, we usually have to cram in a couple of Jillians now and then." Lily put a finger on her lips and started mumbling, trying to recall every little information that she could remember. "Do you actually remember all of that? Or are you just guessing?" Lily heard the curious tone in Ichigo's voice, so she stopped muttering and looked at him. "What are you talking about?" "Of course I remember all of it. What did you think I was doing while I was Stark's lieutenant?" "Well, I thought you just slack off all day and hang around with Loli and Minoli at the plaza." Ichigo confesses. He rarely saw Lily doing any actual office work. Ulquiorra's division was less about paperwork and more about running around the entire place. "Oh." She gave Ichigo a toothy grin. "Spying on me, stalker?" "Yeah, to make sure you were working." Rolling her eye, Lily said, "I do my job perfectly fine. Besides, most of the times when I'm busy is right after an attack or the monthly reports that I get from all the divisions. Ugh, trust me when I say that I used to get stuck in my offices for days, and I mean days, because of those reports." "As Stark's lieutenant, what did you do?" "Well, before the information center got established, every little report from all the divisions got sent to me and I summarized every little detail in the report before I sent them later to Stark." She sighed before continuing, "At least Ulquiorra made my job easier by doing the weird eye thing." "What weird eye thing?" Ichigo curiously asks. What the hell had Ulquiorra shown her? You never seen him pull out his eye before? Okay, so that wasn't what he expected. He turned to Lily to see her imitate Ulquiorra's weird eye trick. With a hand he pulls out his eye before crushing it and telling you to absorb the Ryatsu so that you can see everything he has seen for the last 2 hours. It's super creepy. Seeing as they still are heading deep into the woods, she asks. Where are we going? Ichigo looked towards the gigantic tree that Love had pointed towards. Sadly, we won't be able to catch the hollow today since it's back to Baragon's territory, but Love found something very interesting for me. He stopped and remembered their promise. I mean us. He found something very interesting for us. It took Lily a second to figure it out, but when she did, she smiled. Yeah, I'm sure he did. He still remembers their first promise, to learn the history of Hueco Mundo together. They both came to a halt once they got close. From far away, both Arrancar could tell that the tree would be huge by how its body easily dwarfed the surrounding trees, but once up close, they realized just how big it was. The tree made from the strange stone material occupied just as much space as 8 city blocks. This one is bigger than the last one. Ichigo was referring to when he found Dordoni and Mosqueda with a bunch of the humane hollows in a familiar-looking tree fortress before, but that one wasn't as big as this one. After a while, his eyes scanned the tree's strange rock bark to find the entrance that Love told him about. He started walking around by the side for a while before finding the entrance, which was just a vast hole made into it. Lily leans her head inside to see anything, but her vision only reaches a few meters before darkness conceals the rest. It's too dark to see in there. She heard Ichigo and turned around to see him squinting his eyes to see better before looking back inside. Don't worry about it. I got this. She took a step in and started walking deep into the darkness before her presence blended in with the rest of the shadows, and then she brought her left hand out and focused on gathering her Ryatsu at her palm. It only took seconds for her to concentrate on her Ryatsu and look down at her creation. A bright lime green cylinder that stood only 6 inches tall acted like a torch inside the hollow tree, illuminating green light to reveal anything that was hiding in the shadows. Hearing footsteps, she turned her head around to see Ichigo walking towards her before turning around and showing Ichigo the candle-like object in her hand. What is that? Ichigo asked as he moved closer, his hand reaching the strange object in her hand before she pulled her arm away. Don't touch it, idiot. She looked down at the green candle. Yoruchi-san almost burned her hand when she grabbed it. She couldn't sense any kind of heat at first, but after grabbing it she let go in an instant. So while she didn't burn her hand, she said how there was an unbelievable pain that lasted for a few seconds before her hand went numb and which then lasted for a few days. She stuck her other hand out and created the same green cylinder. Yoruchi-san and Mashiro-Nizan commented on how I don't have a ton of Ryatsu like you or Stark, but they said how that was good because that makes it easier for me to control my Ryatsu. She closed her eye and focused on gathering Ryatsu on her arms and sprouted dozens of the green-like candles across her arms before reshaping them into oddly bent cones. Making it appear as though her shoulders, elbows, forearms had grown thorns. I call it Espina's thorns. She deactivated all but one of the Espinas in her palms and blushed a bit. You, sort of inspired me. I wanted to make something like your Kappa Zero, but I fail miserably every time. Then I remember how I used my Zanpakuto to gather my Ryatsu before shooting it from its tip. So I thought, maybe I can do that with my body, but make it a little different. A few lessons with Yoruchi-san and Nei-san and I got it down. From the corners of her eye she could see Ichigo staring at the Espinas with great intensity and notices the telltale signs of Ichigo frowning behind his hollow mask. Hey, Lily, do you know how to fight? She could already see Ichigo ready to apologize, but she opened her mouth first. Did you forget that I've been training for these last few years too? Okay, so maybe his question sounded a bit rude, so he better defuse the situation with an apology. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for my question to sound mean. Look, let me just rephrase what I meant to say. How do you fight? What sort of fighting styles do you use? Oh, well, she started walking around the room to find a door and hoped it was this room's exit. These past few years I'd only been focusing on Ryatsu control. I sort of lost focus in my Zanpakuto-S training after I couldn't figure out any more unique types of stances for it. She forced a smile on her lips as her eye darted towards Ichigo's white free skin and his dual-color bladeless grips before she rose the corners of her smile to a more believable one. Yoruchi-san and Nei-san trained me really hard so that I can stand next to you. Yoruchi-san helped me develop a Hakuda technique of my own. We sort of worked around with an existing technique called Takigwa and turned it into a unique style called Hataru. As she found a door that led out to a hall, she looked from left to right before she took the lead and started walking left. Hataru is basically a kickboxing style. That's amazing. To create your own fighting style. How about a demonstration? Lily spun around and poked Ichigo's nose before playfully saying, maybe in a spar. She turned back around and started walking again, but not without feeling a bit guilty for lying to him. She stopped with her Zanpakuto's training about 2 years ago, around the time the Vizard started living in Hueco Mundo. There was nothing wrong with the training or the stances that they had taught her, they were all great for having a strong defense and they were even a better offense when she was able to use her blade's ability, Punta, in an unsuspected opponent, but Punta's speed and strength all depended in how fast she could gather and concentrate her Ryatsu. So she dropped her training in the arts of swordsmanship to learn how to control her Ryatsu, and that accidentally led her to the creation of Espina's. From the beginning, Espina's appearance didn't look the same as it does now. From the start it looked like a green blob of Ryatsu that appeared patched into her skin. During the time she was still training with Mashiro, she asked her about any pointers, but sadly her sister figure didn't know much about Ryatsu control, which was what led her to ask Yoruchi for Ryatsu training. She wanted to make her new ability to be like Ichigo's Kappa Zero, which never happened. Ichigo's white-skin shield was something different and more difficult to imitate. So she couldn't recreate a perfect shield, but she was able to create an amazing, unstoppable sword. Espina's wasn't anything like Stark's soul separation abilities, Okuyura's amazing regeneration or Ichigo's white shield. Instead, it became the replacement for her Zanpakuto. Later she eventually learned that her new ability appeared to be an extended and more strengthened version of her Zanpakuto's Punta. Which caused an additional challenge to rise but wasn't too difficult to beat because thankfully she learned a few tricks from Yoruchi in Ryatsu control. So after months of lessons and training, she was able to develop her new ability. Again, it wasn't anything too flashy to what everyone could do, but when she ranked them all down to which abilities stumped the other one, there was no doubt in her mind that among all the Arrancar, which are only 8, she probably ranked second among them. First place seems to be held between Stark and Ichigo. Stark could easily outnumber and outmatch anyone in power because of his abilities, and thanks to his soul wolves, the man didn't really need to do much fighting. Usually 5 wolves was enough to scare away Barragan's army for whenever the old king of Hueco Mundo felt cocky enough to try a frontal assault on them. Even when she involved the Vizards with their unique Bankai, Stark still held a prominent position. The only people that come close to challenging his strength in abilities are Urahara, Shinji, Yoruchi and Ichigo. Now there's Ichigo. Although he already had several abilities on his belt, her boyfriend had learned a few new tricks these last 2 years. One of the 2 new abilities he learned had to do with the better control he had between his Kappa's powers. It used to be hard for him to change between all 3 different aspects of his Kappa Zero, but after a few months and possibly the hardest training in Ryatsu she had seen him do, Ichigo could finally change between Kappa, Exoesqueleto, Devourer with no problems. Even though he had pushed his Kappa Zero's limits beyond what they were 2 years ago, Stark could still overpower him. Their current spars were proof of that, even though Ichigo was actually getting closer to beating him, something the Vizard still haven't done. Then there was his other new ability, well, not truly a new ability but mostly the mastery of his Zanpakuto, which embraces his Quincy power. Ichigo had always stayed and learned everything he could that an Arrancar could learn, Zero, Bala, Garganta, Sonido, Pesquisa, his Kappa Zero's abilities and finally the newly discovered Gran Rey Zero. Once done with all of that, then what? He tried to learn some of Shinigami's skills but from what she had seen, there were a lot of similarities between Arrancar and Shinigami, so the only thing he could have learned were their strange arts of spells, but that proved to be abilities that only Shinigami could possess. So that only left him with about only one thing he could try to learn. His Quincy powers. However, the only problem with learning about his mother's heritage had narrowed down to the fact that as far as they knew, the only and last remaining Quincy was Ichigo's uncle, and during the last 2 years that the war with Baragon began, he couldn't leave Hueco Mundo and go to the human world for training. The only thing he could have done was talk with Urahara and see if the blonde had anything, which he did, but it wasn't much. In her opinion, it wasn't worth a minute of his time to learn the only 2 abilities that he was capable of. One of them was a variation of Sonido and Shuunpa, Hirenkyaku. Nothing new and nothing special, but still Ichigo used his time to learn it. A complete waste of his time is what she would have told him, but wouldn't say it because Ichigo had once told her before that knowing at least a bit of his mother's heritage made him feel closer to his late mother. So out of respect for both Ichigo and his mother, she kept her opinion to herself. The second ability that he learned from his Quincy powers had to do with the mastery of his dual-color blades. Like Quincy, Ichigo can create weapons by gathering Reisha around him, but being a unique hybrid, Ichigo doesn't just gather the Reisha around him but the Ryatsu of other spiritually aware beings. He had tried creating bow and arrows like a Quincy could but found out that he could only change the forms and sizes of his Zanpakuto, which wasn't an enormous deal for him. He carried them in their seal state, bladeless and only the grips. As she peeks a look at him from the corner of her eye, she couldn't help but internally groan as Ichigo had removed his Kappa Zero for whenever he was in Hueco Mundo or wasn't on any important mission. She actually misses seeing the skin layer armor. She didn't beg but she sort of downplayed it that he should just be wearing his Kappa all the time, but he always says how it's a waste of energy. Kami, is this how Ichigo felt like when she didn't listen to him about wearing a bra or something to cover her chest? She moved her eye away from him and looked back forward, trying to push down the dishonesty. She was more or less a liar for telling Ichigo that she stopped her Zanpakuto training to focus on her Ryatsu control. Besides the fact that she mastered her stance, what made her stop her training was the way both she and her Zanpakuto felt rather distant. There was something about her blade that made her feel oddly numb when using it, or better yet, feel as though her sword doesn't want to get used by her. Yoruichi always told her about the saying that a weapon is a part of the user's body, but she didn't feel like that was the case for her. To her, she felt the complete opposite, as if she's supposed to feel like a weapon instead. Maybe it had to do with the fact that she has been denying this entire time that she didn't know who the voice in her head belonged to. Ichigo lived through the same situation, and Stark did too. This whole time, she has been hearing her Zanpakuto's spirit. And she won't ever accept it, not with the way it'll talk so ill about Ichigo. It wasn't or supposed to talk about Ichigo in that way, her spirit's supposed to represent a deep part of her soul, shouldn't it? And if it does, why would she ever feel like that towards him? It doesn't matter because as long as it takes, she won't ever accept her Zanpakuto. What's the worst that could happen? During the same time, Soul Society. After the captain meeting held today, Yukitake had invited Shunsui over to talk about what he saw in the human world and he couldn't help the smile on his face as he kept talking about it. I'm telling you Shunsui, everything looked like what I would expect if we made a treaty with the Arrancar. Yukitake coughed into his hand before picking up a handkerchief to wipe away the slight traces of blood. Curse illness. He looks up to his best friend and notices the small and weak smile on his faded bearded face. I'm letting my excitement get to me again, aren't I? He sighed and refilled the man's tea again. Picking up the beverage and smiling into the edges of the cup, Shunsui said, well, I understand your excitement. He took a sip of the drink and let out a satisfying sigh, not sake but still a wonderful drink. But I think you're getting excited over the wrong thing. The 13th Division captain had the decency to look a bit ashamed. Yes, well, if you saw what I saw then perhaps you would feel the same. He looked out through the only window in his office. Zangetsu came and took the hollow away with no sort of conflict starting. He came, did his job and left. Well, his job could put us out of business. Shunsui commented after he took another sip and put the cup down. Trust and believe me when I say that our lives would be easier if the Arrancar made things this simple, but you have to question yourself, what'll happen to us? What would the whole point of the Godiai 13 be if the Arrancar are doing our job? Excellent point. Seeing his friend sad wasn't something Shunsui wanted to see, and it felt worse when he'd caused the sadness, but he needs to point out the reasons. The scene which he retold at the captain's meeting today had put some captains on the edge of breaking into Hueco Mundo and caused a massacre. I know it's nothing to be happy about, or sad, on the contrary, but many of the captains are seeing this as a threat to our way of life and possibly the entire balance of the world. I'm even sure you had scared a few of us when Zangetsu told you the way they made a government. I mean, the thought is scary. Organize hollows? That sounds like trouble to me. Planned and calculated attacks. How well are we prepared for it? Do we have the proper amount of Shinigami to possibly defend the entire world? We could always ask the other branches for help if things become too hard for us to handle. Shunsui picked up his cup again and thought about it as he took another sip. While Soul Society is considered the East Branch and there are 3 more, then possibly asking for help wouldn't be an awful idea, if the old man wanted to look pathetic in front of the other branches. We both know that Yamajiji will be too stubborn to ask them for help. If things get too bad then he'll ask help from the Zero Squad, but the other branches? I don't think so. Unless things get dreadful. Which is something that no one wants. Their conversations drifted from the worries of Zangetsu to the newly appointed captain of the 10th Division, Amagai Shusuk, a promising Shinigami, and while his leadership had shown, the man was still a bit too timid when attending a meeting. Hell, both of them would if they had to stand next to someone like Captain Kuratsuchi and Zaraki. After a few more drinks and a farewell, Shunsui wandered around. Not much work today, and because of either fate or a sense of nostalgia. He walked down towards the old road he used to take when heading to the Shinigami Academy. When times were much simpler and easy. He barely visited the school's grounds, but when he did, he always felt a bit at home. The halls, walls and rooms still looked the same as they always had, and he bets how that will never change. As he walked down a hall, he noticed a few students outside the room. His curiosity piqued and walked towards them. I'm sure you're supposed to be inside the room if you're trying to learn anything. He smiled towards them when they turned around. See Captain Shunsui. One student recognized him instantly. Sorry that we're outside the classroom, sir, but Captain Aizen's classes get packed and there's never enough room for everyone. The captain's left eyebrow slowly climbed up to his hairline before trying to sneak a peek inside the room, and as the students moved to let him see, he felt his right eyebrow join in with his left at his hairline. He thought the students were possibly joking or exaggerating when they said that Aizen's class was packed, but lo and behold, the room was literally quite packed. He found some students standing or sitting down towards the corners of the room. What did Aizen teach again? Calligraphy class, right? Why would so many students attend it? He looked towards the center of the room to find the man, and when he did, Captain Aizen found him too and sent a nod and smile towards his direction before continuing his lecture. Mind repeating the question again, Harada-san? Is it true that we're going to war against the Hollows and that's why all the classes have sped up? Well, that's not a question to ask in a calligraphy class. Shunsui didn't bother finding the female speaker, instead his attention was on Aizen in trying to see how the man would defuse the troublesome situation. War is something none of these students needed to live through. Well, that's not something to ask in a calligraphy class. Aizen let the chuckles settle down first before answering. It's true that classes have gone up at an unusual speed, but that's only because we're preparing you for the smallest chance of the worst plausible scenario. Which is war? The student asked again, and Aizen smiled in her direction. And as much as we all would like to believe otherwise, the chances of war are something we can't overlook. However, this doesn't mean that the Godiai 13 isn't trying to stop it. War is something that no one should live through. Another student raised his hand and spoke before getting called out. So does that mean the Godai 13 will do anything they can to kill Zangetsu? Well, as Captain Tozen likes to say, we must take the path with less bloodshed. Shunsui watched as the same student spoke up again with the next followed-up question and answers, causing something inside his head to click. Why did the captain start labeling Zangetsu as an Arrancar and not some Vastolord? We didn't call them Arrancar first, but we don't see the reason to change their category to something different. Seeing how the word Arrancar can translate to tear, which turned out to be quite the fitting name since these hollows had tear their masks. But why would a hollow ever do that? Isn't their mask supposed to represent their heart, since the only way to kill them is by destroying it? They're crippling themselves, but that's not what's happening. Aizen sadly smiles towards the student. We don't quite know why a hollow would ever do such a thing, but rest assured that it appears as not all hollows can tear their hearts. Seeing as how only 5 Arrancar have ever been spotted, and these are the group of hollows that we are searching for. Shuansue's eyes slowly widened and he turned around to head back towards Yucatec because that small back and forward conversation had told him something dreadful. These Arrancar had torn pieces of their heart, but some were still there. A small portion of their hollow nature was still ever so present, and unless they tear away everything, they won't ever learn what it's like to feel complete. It's almost like when a Shinigami thinks they learned Bankai, but the Zanpakuto's spirit doesn't fully recognize its wielder, thus it gives its wielder a fake Bankai's name and not its accurate name, resulting in the Bankai not being in its authentic form and therefore weaker. Arrancar could be the same thing. Arrancar, a hollow that has torn his own heart, but there's something still missing for them. They have to achieve something, some kind of inner peace or perhaps a mental breakthrough about who they are. Hollows are still a bunch of souls stuck inside one entire body, but Arrancar are different, far too different. Most of those souls may be under their total control, but what if the last thing they're missing is to understand their own soul? The reason for being what they are, perhaps. If they learn who they are, then their heart will finally vanish. They'll be complete. Completo. It wasn't a sentence closure, it was a hint. The moment he steps outside the school's gate, he flash-stepped towards his best friend. The Arrancar haven't achieved their last form. They haven't achieved their Bankai. Hueco Mundo, a few hours later. Do you feel it now? Ichigo narrows his eyes at Lily's words. It took him a while to pick up the weak sense of an Arrancar's Ryatsu that was right behind the current wall that seemed to be a dead end to their exploration, but Lily had stopped him when she didn't follow him through the Garganta to head back to La Estrella because she was able to sense traces of Ryatsu. He nodded, yeah, I can now, and there's no doubt about it. It's an Arrancar, and it seems like it's right behind this wall. Lily looked around and trying to find some sort of secret entrance. Looks like we need to find some other way around. She looked at Ichigo to see him flexing his right arm before pulling it back and punching the wall, creating an entrance into the secret room. Or you can also, punch a hole into it. Ichigo rolled his eyes before squinting them when a second source of light randomly hit his eyes. Only taking a few seconds to adjust, he fixed his eyes to see how they had found a larger and, rather strange, circular room. Following the light, he noticed how it came out from the top of the room before reflecting off the blade of a basic katana with an hourglass-shaped guard that seemed placed in a crater at the center of the room. He searched across the room to find the Arrancar that they had been sensing, but he couldn't see or sense anything else besides the sword. As Ichigo headed towards the sword, Lily headed towards the walls. Something felt odd as his golden eyes looked at the sword before looking around the room. Who would leave their Zanpakuto here? Or how did someone come into the room and leave, with the fact that there weren't any exits? His eyes didn't bother searching throughout the rest of the room, and he looks back to the sword when he felt a strange attraction towards the weapon. He grabs the katana but didn't pull it out. Why? Do I feel like I know who this belongs to? He whispered quietly before Zangetsu answered him with a sad tone. Well, you shouldn't, that's for sure, but even though I never met him before, I know who it belongs to. Who? Ichigo. The redhead stopped his conversation with his inner hollow to turn to Lily, his girlfriend, pointing at the wall while her mouth was forming words, but she couldn't find her voice, so instead she looked like a fish trying to breathe when stranded on land. "Lily, what's wrong?" He saw Lily move her body, and the arm that held Espina's revealed something drawn into the walls of the room. As he got closer and the green light revealed the drawing, his eyes slowly widened. Hollows. What Lily found weren't drawings but carvings of thousands of hollows into the walls, each no bigger than 7 inches. So while not new to them, what made this different was how detailed every hollow was. They were all of distinct sizes, with masks and their hollows hole found in different locations across their bodies, a few even seemed to replace one of their eye sockets. As he kept inspecting the wall, he saw something new. A couple of yards above the hollows, Ichigo could see the drawn forms of Jillians, and that was entirely something he never saw before in the pillars, not in a single one of them, but now he found them here in a totally isolated location. Why? Looking at them more closely, Ichigo could see how some Jillians wore different masks. And what's going on with the strange singular crack running across the wall? "Ichigo, look at this." Broken from his thoughts, Ichigo looked at Lily to see her lone eye wider than before, and as he followed her line of sight, he felt his eyes widen, too. Right above the Jillians, a couple of feet above them, stood another patch of hollows in smaller numbers, with each looking somewhat human. "Vasto Lords," his head rushed towards Lily. "These drawings are showing us the hollow evolution. First are the newly born hollows, then the Jillians, followed by Ajuchas and then Vasto Lords." Lily looked at him and then back at the drawings before she moved her arms to see if there was anything more drawn, when her light stumbled upon a large circle carved into the walls that they had dubbed as the moon. The strangest thing about the circle was the way it seemed to have been carved over the drawings of hollows, and then she looked up when she thought she saw more. She increases the size of her Espinas, and with it, the light reveals even more above them. Arrancar. There was still more, he could feel it. This room wanted to tell them its secrets. "Lily," Ichigo looked at Lily, her eyes still glued on the Arrancar drawings. "Go to the center of the room and try to brighten up the room with your Espinas." "Huh? Oh, right." She ran to the middle of the room and stood next to the sword before she dispersed the green thorn in her palm, letting the darkness reclaim most of the room before she sprouted a dozen Espinas running down her arms. Just by how much this room had revealed, it perhaps showed a small amount of Hueco Mundo's history, and Ichigo wasn't expecting much anymore. But he was wrong. If these are Arrancar, then, what are those? The drawings above the Vasto Lord reveal Arrancar, but the ones above them looked more like the one he'd seen in the pillar, hollows with a human appearance, with a hollow mask above his head and no hole. The pillars only had hollows, the masked humane hollows and the moon. None of them ever had Jillian's or regular hollows, Vasto Lord or Arrancar before. But these images are showing the steps of their kin's evolution, are they not? And if it is? At that question, Ichigo's brain stopped. If the drawings are showing just that, then does that mean there's another step for them? Being an Arrancar isn't the last step. He whispered quietly to himself before his head snapped to Lily, his voice filled with so much excitement. "There's another step for us. Our power can go higher. We don't stop at being Arrancar." He thought the excitement would reach her, but Lily was looking at the image of the human hollow with an almost haunted expression. Lily held her breath as her mind recalled the strange memory she had about 2 years ago. The drawing of the man on the wall was that of Gareth. She recognized his lanky form with his sharp facial features and brown hair shaved from the left while his right side was braided into a single bun. His clothes were the same as she remembered in the memory, and above his head, there was a mask that resembled an eagle's skull. Gareth. Her eyes stayed looking at the man's figure until Ichigo blocked her field of vision by putting his head in front of her. "Lily, are you okay? You look a bit sad." Ichigo backed away as she slowly shook her head, trying to shake the glum feeling in her mind. "I'm fine, Ichigo," she smiled at him, softly but with no happiness behind her expression. She would have said more, but now that she wasn't solely focused on Gareth, her eye notices another detail drawn into the walls. "Ichigo, turn around and tell me what you see." He did as he was told and froze. Standing and examining the drawings on the walls at a close proximity, Ichigo wouldn't have found out that the crack wasn't an effect caused by Father Time. It seemed purposely placed there, no, more like purposely drawn there to represent the gigantic silhouette form of a hollow, easily the size of half the wall with a bunch of the hollows of all stages of evolution drawn inside its body. With the man Lily called Gareth placed at the center of the hollow's face. His vision then soared to the object he had dubbed the moon, and until now, he realizes how it placed perfectly at the center of the hollow. It's not the moon. It was never the moon, it was a hollow hole. But what does that mean? Why would anyone draw a bunch of hollows inside a bigger one? She couldn't help but yell her question as Ichigo. So everything they had guessed on the pillars was wrong? Are they back to the beginning of their personal mission? Guess he's feeling the same thing as her right about now. This little discovery had set them back to square one. I don't know. All I know now is how we weren't the only Arrancar that ever existed and that we can go further into our evolution. The light started fading and Ichigo turned around to see if Lily had lost her focus from all the shock, but he saw how the sword stuck in the ground started absorbing Lily's espinas. He didn't need to warn her. She cut off her control over the green thorn and turned around to look at him. Well. That just happened. Ichigo watched the blade glow a light green before it slowly faded away and it got a few questions to pop into his head. This is someone's Zanpakuto, an Arrancar most likely. Or whatever those other hollows are. Lily slowly frowned and turned to the spot that the darkness had retaken. She wonders if the Zanpakuto belonged to Gareth. She looked around the room and then out of curiosity she looked up to the hole where she knew the moonlight was coming into the room by. There's no way I can get any more surprise but... Hey, Ichigo, would you look at that? The redhead didn't want to look. Surely there wasn't anything left in this room that could top off what they discovered. So he didn't look up and stared blankly at the wall. Is it something good? Or bad? She shrugged, want me to tell you or you rather see it yourself? He sighed, closed his eyes and looked up. I'd rather just see it. He then opens his eyes to have his heart stop beating. The moonlight lighted the ceiling only enough to reveal the drawing of a woman with what he now definitely knew was Hueco Mundo's moon place at the center of her chest, but what really halted his heart was the fact that he knew who the woman was and her name didn't come out from his mouth. Luciana. How do you know that na? Ichigo senses the Ryatsu and rushed in front of Lily, with his arms crossed in front of his chest and his limbs coated with Kappa Zero. He used his devourer to absorb the blue Zero that came shooting out from the entrance in the wall. After absorbing the last of the attack, he snaps his head back to his girlfriend. Lily. Are you okay? The shock wore off when he yelled her name. I'm fine but... Orange hair and hollow eyes, no doubt about it, you must be the dipshit that everyone always fucking talking about. Zangetsu. Both look back at the entrance to see a man walked out from the smoke, his light blue spiky hair and same shade color eyes that came included with a green line below them stuck out. His clothes included a white hakama, a black sash and a ragged white jacket with an upturned collar. The inner lining of his jacket was black and wore it with the sleeves rolled up and leaving it open, exposing his muscular chest. They saw the remains of his hollow mask comprising a right jawbone and his hollow hole in his abdomen. The man looked at Lily, and a psychotic grin broke out. And without doubt, you're the princess of the sand, Lilynette. Ha! I came for the fucking sword only, but I hit the jackpot instead. His grin dropped when the room started shaking. Ichigo. She didn't need to continue for Ichigo to know what was happening. The Zero had destroyed most of the wall that they came through and now the entire room was shaking and it seems like it was seconds from collapsing. She tapped the air behind her and opened a garganta. Time to go. You're not going anywhere. Ichigo glares at the stranger before aiming one arm at the ground and the other one to the ceiling before firing the collected Ryatsu into a blue and red zero. The explosion shook the room more, causing everyone to lose their balance for a few seconds and releasing the sword stuck in the ground. Ichigo grabs the Zanpakuto and wraps an arm around Lily's waist and shoots straight into the garganta. When they reached the other side of the gate, both of them landed right on top of their bed. Ichigo landed first with Lily landing on top of him with a slight huff. Lifting herself up and straddling Ichigo's waist, Lily looks down at the sword in Ichigo's hand and then back to him. Well, looks like our second official mission as Captain and Lieutenant was a success. Rolling his eyes, Ichigo raised himself up with his arms while Lily still straddled him. Come on, we need to tell Stark what we found today. Minutes later, Grimjow TSK and gives a passing hollow a piss-off look that makes the other lesser creature hurry its pace. As he walked down the halls of Las Noches, he couldn't help stop the dreadful feeling slowly rising in his empty stomach. He didn't want to return without the sword or the delightful news that he got to kill off one of the two most important individuals in La Estrella. Before pushing through the doors to the war room, he fixes his attitude and enters the room before kneeling down. I lost the sword. Zangetsu and the princess found the secret room before I could. He looks up to see Barrigan's ever-present scowl has not changed one bit. See what I meant when I say you should have changed one of my men into an Arrancar, Aizen? This useless ant had just failed such an effortless task. An ant? He bit down on the quick comment he was about to reply to, but Barrigan had already shown him why you shouldn't ever talk back to him. Instead, he looked towards the dark corner of the room where a man, whose name he learned to be Aizen, stepped out from the shadows with his ever-so expression, a simple smile. Maybe you were right, but the sword doesn't matter. We can always get it back. But I think it's about time our plan comes to play. Tyr Harabel? Exactly. Grimjow scowled and left the room while wondering how they'll recruit the Vastolord. TSK, times like these I wish I would have gone to La Estrella. But the king of La Estrella didn't share the same views as him. The only thing he and the old king have in common is the natural law they both live by: the strong are the ones to rule over Hueco Mundo. He stuck his hands inside the pockets of his pants and glared forward. Doesn't matter, I'll make my fucking move, and when I do, I'll kill both Barrigan and Coyote. Chapter 23, of Confessions, Lies and Betrayals. X. Stark looked at the Zanpakuto that got dropped on top of his desk by Lily with a slow and slothful expression. He scans the weapon from the tip of its blade to down at its guard before looking back at Lily. Explain. She can't just toss a sword and have him be impressed by it. Before speaking, Lily fixed her posture. She straightened her back with her arms down too. Captain Kurosaki and I went down to Minos Park after Minoli and Loli informed us that subdivision leader Love requested our presence. So after a quick trip and an explanation, Love pointed us towards the location of an unknown structure. You found a building? Stark asked, leaning back on his wooden chair. Kami, he needs to ask Urahara or Sale to make him a comfy chair. Or he should change it to one of his bean-bag chairs that he has lying around in his apartment. He looked around the plain and boring-looking room. The only decorations he has here in his office are the simple wooden desk, the very uncomfortable chair and two large file cabinets set right behind him. Well, at least he used some colorful file folders. Lily scratched her left cheek and dropped her pose. Well, no. Technically, it was a temple. Ichigo rolled his eyes and stepped forward with no state of carriage in his form. It was about the same place where I found Mosqueda and his friends at. Only that it was probably at least 4 times the size of the last one. He stops to look at Lily. Sheesh, there's no point in using that kind of attitude with Stark. Sheesh, it's still him, king or not. Was that supposed to be an insult or something? Well, Stark didn't know and seemed to not care as he shrugged. Let's not change the conversation, you two. Because whenever both of you find something, there's always a story behind it. Ichigo continued on from where Lily stopped. I'll just get straight to what happens and not bore you. So, after a few hours of searching inside, Lily sensed someone's ryatsu behind a wall, and instead of looking around for an entrance, I punched a hole into it. His cheeks rose and contracted, causing vertical lines at the side of his face that his hollow mask didn't cover, hinting Stark that he was grinning behind it. What we found inside was more than just a sword. Stark cocked an eyebrow, and he was about to ask Ichigo to just spill it already when Yoruichi burst into the office with her eyes glued on several sheets of paper. I'm back. See how I told you that I would only take a couple of minutes to go around the other divisions to pick up their monthly reports. Yoruichi's eyes haven't left the papers as she walks towards Stark. She even bumps into both captain and lieutenant of the SNP division without realizing it. Would you look at this, Sale is actually asking for permission into experimenting on some of Barragan's soldiers. She looks up from the report and smirks at Stark. I wonder if you had anything to do with that. He didn't feel one bit abashed at being caught. Yes, well, Urahara told me how Sale has been doing just that behind my back. So I gave him a little warning to not break the rules behind my back. I swear to Kami that almost reminds me of old man Yamamoto. He never spoke about threats, but with how calmly he would explain a punishment to someone who would try to break the law behind his back. You wished he rather punished you. Until this point, Yoruichi finally acknowledges the presence of Ichigo and Lily. And what are you two doing here so early at? She looks at the clock on the wall and then back to the pair. 7 in the morning. Forgot I had that clock, too. The clock only held his attention for a brief second before he took the papers away from Yoruichi's hand so that he could read through them, and until now, which he finally remembered, none of the reports were summaries down to only the most important details. Great, now I need to actually read through all of this to figure out what's important and what's not. He glances over to Lily, then raised the papers over his head and said out loud in a very obvious voice, "Oh, how I wish my old dear lieutenant could help me out, you know, as a parting gift for sending her off into a better division." The corners of Lily's fake smile twitched. I guess I can do it one last time. Hearing her, a slight smile stretched across Stark's lips. Why, thank you so much. He then looks back down to the reports. By the way, Yoruichi, since I won't be posting you in Karakura town for a while, I'm gonna need you around here for a bit, you know, as a replacement for Lily. Before the woman would reply, Lily butts in and continues on where Ichigo stopped, but instead of talking about the drawings in the wall, she drops their biggest discovery into the room. Stark, we can go higher. Her words seemed to only leave Stark and Yoruichi confused, and before she could clear up what she was talking about, Ichigo spoke up. Stark, we aren't the only Arrancar that ever existed in Hueco Mundo, there were others before us and greater hollows than us. Stark's slight goofy attitude started clearing off as he looked back at Ichigo with a bored and uninterested attitude, but with everyone knowing of Stark's habit, they all knew that Stark wasn't trying to react to the news in the same way as others would. Greater than us, he only took a second to think about the possible subtle message behind Ichigo's words. The way for a hollow to be greater than us is by doing some very important achievement. Which could only mean that they got to reach something higher than an Arrancar. Again, Stark saw the signs of a broad smile molding behind Ichigo's hollow mask. He took a slow breath through his mouth and looked at the clock on the wall. Urahara and Sale wanted them to come over to the plaza early today to check out their latest creation, but he figures the news that popped out of Ichigo's mouth was more important. Well, Urahara and Sale wanted to only see Ichigo, so maybe I can send him over to them while Lily explains what they found. Doesn't sound like an awful idea. Yoruichi, go take Ichigo with the crazy duo. Lily, please come help me out with dealing with all these reports. He looks back down at the sheets and misses the brief look shared between Lily and Ichigo. Yoruichi didn't miss the looks and teased both of them for it. She put herself between both teens and wrapped an arm around Ichigo's neck. Come on, I'm sure your girlfriend could use some time away from you, seeing how you're both glued to each other's hips. She's not I'm not high. Both teams got to bite down on their words before it left their mouths and gave each other a quick glance before looking away with a healthy blush across their face. Stark seemed to have ignored their reaction but not the workcat. She looked at Ichigo and then at Lily. It was a little hard to read their expression, but the pink on Lily's cheek, and what she must assume the same color on Ichigo's cheeks, was already telling her plenty enough already. Lily was the brave soul to open her mouth. I wouldn't mind being the idiot's girlfriend. She whispered her words, not loud enough for everyone to hear her, but with how quiet the room was, she was sure everyone had, including Stark. She took a second to look at her brother/father figure, but the man seemed to have ignored her confession. Ichigo spoke up next, his voice no louder than Lily's. I would love to have someone like Lily to be my girlfriend. He looked at Stark at the end of his confession, and just like Lily's, he seemed to have ignored him too. Nothing about Stark's expression told them that he heard or even cared about what they both just said, and as Lily sensed his ryatsu for some kind of disturbance, she found Stark's ryatsu to feel calm as it always had been. The news did not disturb him. The odd atmosphere in the room vanishes once Yoruchi opens her mouth. All right kid, come on, let's see what Urahara and Sale got for us. She gently drags Ichigo away with her arm around his neck. We can take the long way too, 'cause I'm kind of interested in hearing everything you've got to say about that. You're talking about the Zanpakuto, right? Ichigo hopes that's what she's talking about, but sadly that wasn't the case since he saw her eyes land on Lily and then she turned around so that he could see her smirk. Yeah, sure, the Zanpakuto. She waves at Stark as she walks out of the room with Ichigo. Don't take too long. They might not need you for the experiment, but Urahara and Sale want you to be there. Only receiving a grunt of acknowledgement from the man, Yoruchi left the room after that and closed the door behind her. So you wanna fill me in on the story, kid? Ichigo looked at Yoruchi's grinning face and sighed, please tell me you're not talking about what I think you're talking about. The fact that she grinned an inch higher made him groan softly. Were things that obvious between us? Oh, things were really that obvious. Everyone already knew something was gonna happen between you two. The only two things we didn't know was when it would happen and who would have been the one to confess first. She unwrapped her arm from the redhead's neck and shrugged, most of us bet that Lily would be the first one. She went back to grinning, so make me a few thousand yen richer and just tell me that Lily was the one to confess first. If Yoruchi was expecting Ichigo to sprout random words of embarrassment, it rather disappointed her when a clear sentence accompanied with an irritated tone in voice left his mouth. Bet? What bet? Wait a minute, are you telling me that there's a betting pool circle around Lily and me? And it has to do with who confesses to who first? What the hell? Maybe she should have waited after Ichigo's story to tell him about that. The room was already pretty quiet, but with the absences of Ichigo and Yoruchi, things were dead silent. Lily stood stiff but occasionally shifted her weight between her feet as a means to get rid of the uncomfortable feeling that slowly swirled inside her stomach. It wasn't until she notices the lack of sheets moving around that she looks at Stark to see him staring at her. You okay, Lily? You look a bit rigid. Huh? No, sorry. I was just looking for a chair to sit on before I helped you out. She felt stupid as Stark cocked one of his eyebrows and looked around the room. It took you a while to figure out that I don't have any extra chairs here? He asked before standing up and motioning for Lily to take a seat on his chair. The least I can do for you is make you feel a bit comfortable as you do one last job for me. He set half of the reports on his desk for Lily to read through and the other half for him to summarize what he could on his own. As Lily looks at the set of sheets on his hand, he smiles towards her. I got to learn how to do this by myself since I sent you off to be Ichigo's lieutenant. She only nodded once and sat down on the chair so that she could get to work. The sound of flipping sheets now appears to strangely go along with the awkward setting that she seems to be the only one to recognize. She peeks away from the reports and up to Stark, the brunette walking back and forward as his eyes move along with every word he's reading. completely or utterly ignoring her distress. She looks back down and starts a conversation by talking about what both her and Ichigo had found. So about what we found. So how are things between you and Ichigo? Stark seemed to have a different thought to ask, and as she looks toward him, she notices how he hasn't stopped reading or walking in circles. She didn't know about what Stark was asking about, or hoped he wasn't asking about what she thought he meant, so she looked at him with a puzzled look. What are you talking about? He looks away from his boring work and returns to look back at Lily. I mean, something must have changed between the both of you because of the mixed feelings you seem to radiate right now. His old companion seemed to have gotten caught, so she looked back to her work. He followed suit, but wasn't reading anything. Lily was hoping she was doing an excellent job at hiding the pink flush across her cheeks. Damn it. Wasn't Ichigo supposed to be the one to tell Stark about them? But now it seems like it'll end up being her work instead. Just great. She flips to a recent report so her brain can think of how to either respond to his assumption or how to slowly reveal to him that she and Ichigo were a thing now. You know. I don't need our souls connected to know that what happened between you and Ichigo had made you happy. She found her eye looking back at Stark, standing still with a soft slight smile on his face. I also know that I'm making you feel very uncomfortable. He looks back down with a smile that's not leaving his lips. I hope you understand that there's nothing to worry about. I won't be mad or disappointed. I know you won't, but I don't know where to start. She knew where to start, she just didn't know how to. Should she just spill it? Admit to Stark that they'd both had slowly grown feelings for each other through the last few years, and until recently they had confessed to each other. If she tells him, will he strongly disapprove of their relationship? He said how he wouldn't be mad or disappointed, but he could also not allow their relationship or actually accept the idea. Her eye traveled to the current report she was reading and started crumbling the edges as a manner of controlling her steadily rising anxiety. Stark, I honestly don't know if I can tell you. I don't know what your reaction might be. I don't know if you would be angry with me. Maybe that's what she's worried about. She mentally kicks the thought away and looks back to Stark. The man's bored expression was back, and with a yawn, he looked at her and she could see an idea pop into the man's head. What if I make things more comfortable for you? And then he vanishes. Huh. For a moment before reappearing back into the room with 2 bean bags. She watches him set the cushioned seats down with only a few spaces apart from one another. Stark then took a seat on the bean bag that was the same color shade as his eyes while he left the orange one for her. She honestly felt like crying and laughing at the same time. Did Stark know already, and he wanted her to just declare her feelings? She didn't laugh or cry, but she took Stark's invitation and walked over to sit down on the orange-colored bean bag. She puts her hands on her knees and stares at them. What should she do? As if stating the obvious, Stark says, "You're wearing his shirt." He yawns into his left hand before putting them behind the back of head and closing his eyes. I'm happy for both of you. She looked back at him, but Stark seemed to have gone to sleep right there and then. After a few minutes soft snoring reached her ears, and she didn't know how to feel about it. He possibly knew, no scratch that, he knows, but he seemed to not even care about it, and that hurt her feelings unbelievably hard. The fact that Stark, her longest and closest companion, and the man she looks up to as her brother/father figure, didn't seem to show any more emotions for her happiness, made her feel so numbed, cold, hurt. Stop thinking like that. Her eye widened as the spirit inside her Zanpakuto spoke, and she felt a slight shock in the sad tone she could feel and hear the spirit talk with. She wasn't going to respond, but then her gloomy attitude slowly changed to a rising anger as she realized that her Zanpakuto's spirit was trying to give her advice. Don't you say anything. I don't want to hear anything from you. Got it? Because the only thing that comes out of your mouth are insults towards Ichigo. After a few minutes and nothing coming from the voice in her head, Lily counted that as a victory before going back into thinking about her current problem, Stark's approval. If Ichigo was with her, would she have an easier time doing this? Fucking stop that already. Lily was about to yell back before her inner hollow continued. You're always fucking thinking or talking about Ichigo. Always. And you know fucking what else? You're pissing me off right now. Me. You're pissing me off. Lily yelled back, anger rising to newer levels. She already knew how her inner hollow was pissing her off, by making itself known, but she's curious enough to know about what the hollow was talking about. Will you let me talk then? Fine. Doesn't this scenario have a sense of familiarity? Alone with Stark. With him sleeping off with no care of the world. The hollow Lily had been using a hard stone voice, but until now, at this very moment, she allowed herself to go into a state of vulnerability. We literally grew up like this. This was our life before Ichigo showed up. We didn't hate it, but we also didn't enjoy it. We accepted it as a way of life for us, but the feeling has always been a welcome one because we had each other. What? Lily's eye widened. Why did that hit so close to home? She could agree with her spirit that she didn't hate or enjoy the feeling of futility since there was always a welcoming sense to it, but it was always instantly replaced with fear of feeling useless and insignificant. Of course those thoughts and feelings only emerged shortly after she realized how little her existence matters both emotionally and, literally, spiritually. You know, the hollow Lily's usual hard voice came back, I can't believe I'm going to agree with Ichigo, but, Stark's still the same idiot that he is now as he was over the last 1,000 years. Don't you see it? Stark's trying to make you feel comfortable but making sure it's just you two here. Like the old days. Yeah. The good old days. Who the hell are you? Lily yelled towards the third voice that made itself known but then, nothing, no response. Hello. Lily's mindscape. You just had to say something. Huh. The white-skinned Lily dragged the malnourished child out of the cave by her hair before tossing her out to the scorching sun and sand. You're not, I'm emphasizing this as clearly as I can, you're not supposed to talk to her. Got it. The smaller Lily rushed to her feet and spun around. I'm sorry. Please. I won't do it again. She tries rushing into the cave but the older girl kicks her. She grabs her stomach and bent down. Why? I promise I won't do it again. Yeah, I know you won't now. She snarled before turning back around into the cave. The smaller girl looks back to see the form of the inner Lily walk deeper into the cave. I'm sorry. As she felt the blistering sun burning her back, she couldn't help but plead for that man to appear right now. Where are you, Zangetsu? With nothing more coming from her spirit, or spirits, Lily remembers what her inner hollow said, and she quietly sighed before finally relaxing. After she adjusted, she laid her head back so that she could look at the ceiling. Stark. I fell in love with that idiot. She waited to hear the shift of his body as he stood up and looked at her with a disapproval look in his eyes, but it never came. Instead, she could still hear his soft snoring. She took the risk and looked at him, but he was still asleep. As the sound of her throbbing heart rang louder in her ears, Lily calmed down before speaking up again. I mean, it's not like I fell in love with him the moment I saw him, it's just, after everything that had happened, everything we had been through. I slowly started developing a crush on him. She moves her head to look back at him, but Stark is still asleep. I mean, how couldn't I? He brought in so many changes for us, changes that we thought it would have been impossible for us. Her eye went back to the ceiling. Do you remember our lives before Ichigo came around? Around 200 years ago. Her voice took on a glum tone. I do, and I'm sure you do too. It wasn't a very cheerful life, but I mean, being a hollow doesn't really give us a luxury lifestyle either. We used to travel a lot, remember? Because we wanted friends. She glared derisively at Stark. Yes, I'm saying friends, not companions, because that's not what we wanted. That's enough about that. Okay, no more walking down on that stupid memory lane about our shitty 200-year life, and let's talk about the last 6 years. She smiles. Our lives had changed when he first shown up, huh? Before, you wouldn't have dared to go to the forest of Minos. I know it was painful for you since you would worry about killing the weak since you wanted to be around them, but on that day, you changed for the better. More snoring. We made friends. She smiled softly as she thought about everyone. Sure, Sale only wanted to meet and thanked Ichigo for saving his life, but he slowly opened up to us. Ulquiorra was, she stopped and then laughed. She knew why she was talking about things such as friends, but the conversation should keep focusing on why she fell in love with Ichigo. When her laughter calmed down, she continued. Sorry about that, it's just, I know what I'm supposed to be talking about, but I want you to see what I see in Ichigo and what makes him a grand guy. I know, but don't keep me in here for the next 4 hours, so just summarize everything into how you fell in love with him, okay? Stark yawned and shifted into a more comfortable position. Then he opens an eye to see Lily stunned. Don't get the wrong idea, I wouldn't mind hearing every little detail, but we do have a busy day today. Her face reddened, but not because of embarrassment, more like self-anger for not realizing that Stark was awake the whole time. Before she could explode, she sighed and pinched the bridge of her nose. I should have known you were paying attention. Should have shoveled my hand down your throat. The yawn story, please. She heard the snoring again, and she was just about tempted to play her words before giving up. Strangely enough, knowing now that Stark was awake and paying close attention to what she's saying made her feel better, and honestly is making her confession much easier to admit thanks to having her mind clearer. Before I fell in love with him, before I grew a crush on him, he was my first friend ever. It was so easy to get along with him, and it probably had to do with him being a kid like me that we grew really close. Then he became my best friend when he saved my life. She looks back at Stark. I mean, a best friend would do just that, right? Save you from near death. She saw a slight motion of shrugging shoulders. Good, the jerk is still paying attention. Then, she sighs, my crush started growing on the day we both became real Arrancar. After the entire ordeal, and we went to sleep for the night, I woke up some time later after a weird dream, and then out of boredom I looked over at Ichigo's direction and realized what a handsome guy he was. This sounds a lot like those shows you and Ichigo watched at Urahara's place. Stark left a side comment. Not asking for your opinion right now. Lily rolls her eye and continues. Honestly, our relationship took on an odd turn after that day. We were inseparable, even after a stupid argument we still stayed close to each other, we trained together, ate and slept together too. Then came the day he found his family. After Ishin explained his story, and day changed to night, I found Ichigo still underground trying to train. But I knew there was something wrong with him. Her voice lowered down into a whisper. He looked conflicted, and I knew why. I asked him if he was happy with being with his family again, but that's what he seemed confused about. He couldn't decide between us or them. So I made the choice easier for him, I asked him to stay with them. You asked him to live with his family? Stark opens his eyes and looks at her with a doubtful expression on his face. If you had a crush on him, then you wouldn't have told him to go. Lily continued on with the same tone. It wasn't a simple choice for me, but I wanted him to be happy, Stark. He had already made us happy, and I wanted to return the debt. Her smile returned, I didn't really have anything to worry about. He chose everyone. And that made my crush on him grow. Her eye beamed with a slight shine and a sad smile on lips. He introduced me to his mom. Noticing the odd look from Stark, she added, cemetery. Stark hummed before closing his eyes and adding his own 2 cents again. You know, you just don't take anyone to your late mother's grave, you gotta be really close or hold that person in high regard. This is just a crazy assumption, but I think Ichigo may have grown a crush on you back then, too. That thought had crossed her mind before, but hearing it from someone else made her smile. Deciding to end this entire conversation, she said. There was a point in my life when I was having a hard time accepting myself. I was going through an existential crisis, and it all had to do with how I compared myself with you. Curiously, Lily wanted to see if Stark was sleeping off, but to her surprise, he was fully awake and eyes slightly widened. We were so different. You were everything I wish I could have been, and it made me ask, what am I doing here? What was the whole point of me being born? Created? Her expression took on a worried look. Did I even existed at one point? Was I ever someone? Those types of thoughts stayed with me for so long until, she smiled again. Ichigo crashed into my life and started saving me. She stood up and walked around Stark, arms failing in the air. He saved my life. Then he, without knowing, started saving me from myself. He then started making me feel like I had a purpose in life. I felt like I actually mattered to someone, and that started easing my mind. Then he literally, and I can't stress this enough, literally separated our souls and made me into a separate being, finally making me feel like I'm somebody and not an extension of someone else. I mean, who the hell can do something like that? She sighed and flopped back into the comfy orange bean bag. He saved my life. He made me understand the ability to love and be loved and achieve a sense of fulfillment in my life by giving me the chance of making so many friends. I was able to challenge myself too because I was finally me. I was training, learning fresh things and getting older. That last one's still my favorite. Also, thanks to his idea of helping the Hollows, I felt like I could make a difference for the Hollows too, so I started following his footsteps. Instead of protecting them, I want to help the Hollows feel alive and unique, sort of how he made me feel. Stark, how couldn't I love him after everything he did for me? Honestly, I don't see how you couldn't. Stark stretched his arms over his head and stood up. The kid holds a special place in my life too, but nothing of your level. He scratched the back of his head and looked at Lily. In all honesty, I owe Ichigo my life for saving me against my own problems. He saved my life against Baragon, saved me against my own issues when dealing with the solitary lifestyle by giving us friends. Besides, it's not like I didn't expect something between the both of you to happen. Lily stood back up. Wait. You expected for something between Ichigo and I to happen? Why didn't you try stopping it? Would you have wanted me to stop it? Huh? What? No. I'm happy that you didn't, but, she frowned softly. I know you fear feeling alone, so I don't know, watching me slowly leave your side. I thought, well, maybe you would have done anything to make sure that nothing between us would happen. I thought you would have been mad at me, or disapproved of our relationship, but worse of all. I thought you would have hated me for leaving you. She was positive that every typical scenario that she could have thought of or expected had crossed her mind. Star. He watched Lily slowly close her mouth and looked at his outstretched hand that he had lay on top of her before looking back at him. Now why would I ever hate you over something like that? Wait, hold it Stark, am I really going to say what I'm thinking about saying right now? Was this the perfect time to tell Lily just how important she was to him? Had he never actually told her before? Dropped some hints for her. Maybe right now is the perfect time. Lily, you're my family. Who, wah. Come again, dot. But maybe he should have done a better job at it. He groans and takes back his hand. I mean, well, Cammy, how do I say this? You, make me happy. Well, this is about the most complicated thing he has ever done. Or ever will do, and what's with the completely shook look on Lily's face, anyway? Hasn't he been obvious with how he cares and treats her? Look, you had been a sort of responsibility for me, like taking care of someone else's pet. Wait, did that sound wrong? Oh Cammy, that came out wrong. He took a lengthy breath. Lily, you understand that I have trouble expressing myself. Always have, and it'll be a hard habit to fix, so I'm sorry if the next words that come out of my mouth weren't, or aren't what you expected to hear from me. He looked around the room for some sort of distraction that may make this easier for him. As he found his half of the reports neatly placed by his beanbag, he sat back down on it, picked up the papers and started distracting his mind. You and I, we go way back for almost 200 years now, and I guess this entire time that I had been taking care of you, I'd been feeling like a parent watching over his kid. You're an unpredictable, energetic child that just seems to always find ways of disrupting my peace, and as annoying as you may be, I never really felt annoyed towards you since I knew the reason you acted like that. He looks up to meet her wide, lone eye. You weren't so secretive about it. He looks back down. We were one soul before. Our emotions, souls, and minds, we used to share all of that. So I knew the troubles you were going through. So. Did you know about my hopes of dreaming? He nodded. Why didn't you try helping me? Stark didn't need to look at Lily to see the hurt and sad look on her face. Her tone was already giving it away. I try to help you myself, but how could I help you when I couldn't help myself? Also, it doesn't help that your problems were a lack of dreams, while mine was solitude. A smile creeps across his lips. But you were right in how things changed when Ichigo came around. Ichigo was making you happy, and your happiness was also my happiness. Well, around some point, before you know, went off to be your own person. Yawn. Getting distracted. What I'm just trying to say to you, Lily, it's how different our relationship grew. We started off as companions, but later down our lives, I realize you were a sort of responsibility for me, not that of a pet, more like watching over a daughter. He shrugged and looked back at Lily, a shocked expression still glued to her face. I'm not calling you my daughter because you're a chore that I got used to taking care of. I'm calling you my daughter because. Stark. Lily opened her mouth, voice barely above a whisper, but it got Stark to stop his words. Do you understand what you're talking about? Or saying? You're calling me your daughter. Do you understand how serious that sounds? We're not even blood relatives. We don't need the same blood to run through our veins to be family. We're hollows. The word family doesn't work for us, Stark. Neither should love, but, hey, here you are confessing your love towards Ichigo. Stark hummed and relaxed on his cushioned seat. I guess I'm confessing my parental love towards you right now. An awkward silence filled the room, and Stark continued his distraction by looking through the papers to find Okuyura's report, but ever so slightly he could hear Lily's mouth opening and closing in attempts to speak her mind, but failing. Hey, I don't see Okuyura's report in my stack, do you have it? That seemed to have finally snapped Lily's mind, and with it the quick confusion. Then instantly replaced with anger. Damn it, Stark. Don't just change topics like that. We're having a special moment, you jackass. But she still looks through her sheets before stopping. Okuyura doesn't write his reports, he does some weird eye trick. She heard him humming and she couldn't stop herself in the act of merely sighing at his response, however she found herself in a state of peace of mind. So, are you actually okay with me and Ichigo? You remember how Ichigo has sisters, right? How couldn't she made a promise to both of them. How could I ever forget Yuzu and Karen? Wait, the asshole was changing topics again. Stark murmured something under his breath and opened his mouth before Lily could. Wanna know something Ishin once told me before? He pauses, but only to take a second to recall what the Shinigami said. Respect her uniqueness. I also got to make her know that I love her for who she is, her wishes, dreams and choices. I also have to treat her and those she loves with respect. He turned back to her. Apparently those are Ishin's most important rules in how someone should treat their daughter. Is he saying what she thinks he's saying? So, are you telling me that it's okay? She still needs to check with him though. Sure. Just like that? Yep, still asking, Stark sounded a bit unsure of himself. Mind no longer needing a distraction, Stark was now actually reading through the current report from Shinji. I mean, why not? I don't have any problems with Ichigo, he's an excellent kid. Hey, why does Shinji's report look like he's just complaining the entire time? Is he complaining about all the paperwork? Wait. Gur. Stop doing that, you jackass. She glared at him and puffed her cheeks. We kissed last night. That's cute, and yeah, he's just complaining about all the paperwork. Does he actually have something to report, or is he just complaining? So that's it. This was how easy it was. He's not even mad or disapproving of her choice, and if what he said was true, with the fact that he had known something would happen between them, then he could have prevented their relationship, but he didn't. She blinks and her eye slowly moves to the papers in her hands. Read Shinji's report more carefully. He's hinting you on the things that he's hoping you can fix. He needs to come out and say it. Would be easier for both of us. Yeah. Things would have been easier if both her and Ichigo said something about it the moment they burst into Stark's office. She was about to open her mouth and help Stark out when a loud groaning noise came from his throat. Alright, let's just go see what Sale got for us. He stood up and stretched out his hand to Lily's paper. She looked both confused and dubious about her stack before handing them over to him. Don't worry about it. I'll just ask Yoruchi to help me out. He pulls his door back and moves as Ichigo falls to the floor on his back. I was wondering why I could still sense you. He leaned his head outside the door frame and looked to his left at Yoruchi, who was sitting down. I thought both of you went over to Sale and Urahara. The workcat stood up to stretch her limbs and pop some of her joints. We were, but then I asked Ichigo about his brief adventure and we sort of just sat down to chat about it. Yoruchi moved to the side as Stark stepped over Ichigo's body. You and Lily already finished all the work. Stark looked back into the room to see Lily glaring down at Ichigo while the redhead looked back at her. That reminds me. Hey, Ichigo, I'm gonna need a report from you. So turn it in later today. Oh, also, your division's done, it hasn't been open to your members yet, since I want you to check if you want any changes. He put his hands inside his pockets before leaving with a sonido. Lily looks up as Yoruchi gives her a two-finger salute before chasing after Stark with her Shinigami's technique and then looks down at Ichigo. So, heard anything interesting? She gave him a hand to help him stand back up. I honestly wasn't. Yoruchi and I talk about something. There was something strange about Ichigo that Lily couldn't quite point a finger on it. You okay? Yeah, I just had a very interesting conversation with Yoruchi. Ichigo shook his head. Come on, let's go. Sora couldn't believe that this was what the afterlife looked like. After Sailaporo's explanation about where he was and what he had become, he left the science division in shock but found himself lost inside the building before asking for help, which someone had, and guided him towards the first level where he belongs. Some time later he walked down the spiral staircase and stopped at the bottom of the stairs to look around him. Hollows moved through the streets chatting to one another or moving around as any regular person would in their normal days. That's enough looking like an idiot. Needs to remember that the strange pink-haired man gave him a prescription that allows him to order a sizable amount of Arrancar FP. Whatever. He barely moves an inch as another hollow, which is now what he's classified as, bumped into him. He stumbles to his left before catching himself. I'm sorry about that. He looked at the ground, expecting to see a hollow on its back and possibly glaring daggers at him, and instead he saw a hollow with the upper body of a human and the lower body of a scorpion. As he looks closer, he notices that the hollow's upper body was that of a woman with strange features. One of her hands was that of a scorpion's pincer and she had a stinger between the back of her shoulders. It's fine, that was my fault. I was sort of distracted talking with my friend here. Minoli gestures towards Loli, who just seems to scowl softly at the hollow. She sighed and then turned around. Sorry about, huh? He couldn't see it, but Sora was sure that Minoli furrowed her eyebrows. Everyone did that once they realized how he's weaker than the average hollow living in Australia and how half of his hollow mask was missing. Something was telling him it was the latter that both of them seemed to focus on right now. He watched as her dull, green color eyes squinted before going back to normal. Well, aren't you somewhat special? Loli said after her inspection of the new hollow. Her words without doubt meant to sound as a rude comment. Well, to Sora, that's what it sounded like. He couldn't ignore the comment since it seemed to be the only thing people say about him. I tend to hear that a lot. Minoli looked past the hollows and up the staircases that she's confident that he came down from. Did you apply to join a division? She looked at the paper in his hand, a bit crumpled up to see what it was about, but once again, she was confident it was possibly an application. But we don't do any of that. Not really. Sora noticed that both the hollows seemed to have been heading up the stairs. Are both of you perhaps members of a division? Seeing a chance in boosting both her and Minoli's reputation. Loli moved forward and puffed her chest out. Don't bump us with the other lesser soldiers of Escudos. We're the only two royal guards of Hueco Mundo's princess, Lilinet. Wait, you're talking about Lily? Right? A young, beautiful girl with green hair and a pink eye. Sora slightly backs away as the rude girl leans her face closer to his. Her strange double-layered mask's mouth seemed like it was grinning. That's the one. Also, don't be so bold in calling her beautiful when you see her next time, or else her boyfriend might get rid of you. Loli almost burst out laughing as the hollow pale. Minoli rolls her eyes and gently smacks Loli's arms. Please don't scare him like that. Also, you're making it sound like Captain Kurosaki will kill him for over a little compliment like that. She clapped her hands together and slightly bowed down. Sorry about Loli's attitude, she just likes messing with people. She outstretched her normal hand. Sorry for not introducing ourselves yet. I'm Minoli, and as you have heard already, my friend here is Loli. Sora. Her green-eyed beam. Now that introductions are out of the way, I'm curious to see what you have been holding. You mean this? Sora lifted the paper up for Minoli to see, but she took it instead. She only read a couple of sentences before her head rushed toward Sora's face. 20 pills. You have to take 20 pills between 2 weeks. What? Loli rushed over and read over Minoli's shoulders before stopping. Why the hell would Captain Sailaporo have you eat this many? Please. Can you not yell? He looked around to see how the girls yelling had gained the curiosity of some nearby hollows. Is not much of an enormous deal, anyway, it's just food. But no one had taken this much amount before. They give every hollow 5 pills that last for an entire month. The most I saw someone take has been 7, but not 20. Minoli rushed to read through the entire letter. Loli's right, you must be special. She stopped, reread the last sentence before looking up at Sora and then back down again. Sora felt nervous as both sisters got quiet and occasionally looked up from the paper before looking back down. You must be strong or have some sort of super high tolerance level to be around us, or else you would be dead. Loli said after some time, her tone changing between bored and puzzling. Minoli nodded. No doubt about it. I never thought I would ever see a hollow like you here. What are you talking about? I'm a hollow like you. As Minoli gives him back his paper, he frowns softly. Trust us, you're not like us. We're Ajuchas. A class of hollow that has gone through its normal and Jillian stage. Our powers are nothing alike. You're weaker, far weaker than any hollow here, and should also be dead with all these powerful Ryatsu that are here. Minoli looked as more hollow gathered and possibly heard their conversation. His life is now in danger because of us. Hollows will now try to take their chances and kill Sora to take his prescription. They're probably thinking how they might evolve again if they eat more of the Arrancar FP. She looks back to her friend and notices how she just finished looking around too, possibly having the same thoughts as her. Loli then looked at her and nodded before she nodded back. All right, Sora, come with us, we'll take you towards a shop that's near us. Loli turned around and started walking. She turned her head slightly to see Sora behind her while Minoli took the back, but then Sora stopped and slightly started shaking. What tea is that? He looked up towards the top of the stairs. I can sense something powerful coming down here. Minoli and Loli couldn't sense what Sora was talking about, but they could guess who he was mentioning. A few seconds later and both of them could sense the king and the Shinigami woman. Seems like Stark-sama and Yoruchi-san are heading towards Sailaporo and Urahara. Minoli turned around to see Sora still shaking. Guess even you can't handle Stark-sama's Ryatsu. There's another one coming our way. Sora gulped audibly. But this one feels different. Well, that must be. Loli turned around to see Lily materialize in front of them. Yo. Hey. Where are you two heading? No one could answer her as Ichigo appeared behind her. Come on, Lily, I don't want to be late. Loli looked at Sora, slightly shaking in his place. She grinned and moved over to his side before nudging him. Green hair, pink eye, young and beautiful, just like you said. Huh. Both Arrancar said, and before any of them could say a thing, Stark appeared behind them and put a hand on their shoulders. Come on you two, today's gonna be a busy day, so let's get this out of the way. When all the Arrancar left, Sora lost strength in both of his forearms and fell to the floor. Loli rolls her eyes, thinking how the man was overreacting. You know I'm just messing with you, Ichigo wouldn't kill you for something like that. So stop acting so melodramatic. Don't be like that, Loli, been the most caring one out of the two. Minoli kneels by Sora's side and starts patting the hollow's back. She turned to her companion and scowled at her softly. He's not an Ajuchas like us, Stark-sama's and Kurosaki's Ryuryoku are probably too much for him to handle right now. She moved as Sora slowly stood back up. Feeling better now? The Naga-like hollow nodded. I am. I never expected for a captain and the king to feel that powerful. Especially Captain Kurosaki. Minoli noticed the frown on Sora and shrugged. Well, that's Captain Kurosaki for you. He's rather powerful compared to most of the captains. I guess the strange second form of power inside him is why he's more powerful. Also, did Loli call him Ichigo? Kurosaki Ichigo. Why does that name seem familiar to me? He shook his head and looked back at both bug-like hollows. What's wrong? Both of them were quiet and looking at him sternly now. How did you sense them? Minoli couldn't quite sense a hollow's Ryuryoku unless they release it in the form of Ryatsu. The only beings that know how to pick up someone's presence like that are the Arrancar with their pesquisa. Loli sighed and looked at her friend before saying, this idiot may actually be special. Even though he turned around to pick up Lily and Ichigo, Stark narrowly got to beat Yoruchi to the barely built warehouse that Sail and Urahara wanted them to meet at. Okay, 1, I slowed down for you to catch up, and 2, I don't know where they wanted us to meet them at, so I had to let you take the lead, and to do that, I had to slow down, Yoruchi said, arms crossed and pouting. Stark yawned first before walking inside the building. Why is it so hard for you to admit that I'm finally faster than you? Honestly, I feel like I heard every excuse twice from you already. She mumbled an insult under her breath before turning her head to Ichigo and Lily. So what have you two been up to lately? Nothing. Both teens said in unison, making her snicker at them. That was cute. Like something you would see couples do. She turned around to Stark and jabbed his back. Right, Stark? Jab. Right? Jab. Right? Those are some nerves of steel. Lily whispered to Ichigo, both of them watching as Yoruchi kept annoying Stark by poking him everywhere. Ichigo smirks and whispers back, yeah, but how long until Stark snaps? They followed them around a corner and came up to a wide area filled with machines that only both scientists could name and describe their purpose. However, there was one thing in the room that everyone recognized immediately. Stark slowly walks to the glass chamber and lays a hand on it. He looked to his left, where Urahara was rapidly typing something on the computer connected to the glass wall. Urahara, does this mean what I think it means? The blond man shifted his hat slightly up to look at him. I recognize this glass chamber anywhere. Since you use one to transform us into Arrancar. Does this mean that the Hogyoku has awakened again and you're planning on transforming some hollows into Arrancar? He turns back to the machine and notices the recent addition of two metallic boxes, one on top of the chamber and the other one besides the computer that Urahara was working on. Urahara looked back down. Well, that would be nice, but no. The Hogyoku's still hibernating, although it still has some usage. What we have now is something slightly less exciting for us. He looked up and through the glass walls at Sale, who was on the opposite side. Want to drop the news to them since this was your idea? The pink-haired Arrancar stops to smile and push his glasses up. Well, since you insist. He turned to Stark and the others. This entire facility will soon be Hueco Mundo's first of many power stations that will power up La Estrella. Stark lost interest, but was still curious. A power station wasn't something or isn't what he expected them to build. The fact that they took months to build what he assumes must be an electrical power storage, could have been finished in weeks since there are quite a few electrical power stations juicing their entire base of operation, escudos. His eyelids bored down, now feeling utterly bored. I'm sure this little device of yours can do more since you guys could have literally gone to the human world and steal a few more electrical power stations with some generators. Which they had done before. Oh Stark-san, listen more carefully, I never mentioned that we built an electrical power station. What we're building is a Ryatsu power station. Now that Sale had gained Stark's attention, he grinned. You see Stark, any normal form of power stations to us is utterly useless to us, perhaps in the distant future we will need them but what we need now is something far more important, balance. Hearing a clap and turning to see a goofy happy Urahara, Stark gave him his undivided attention. What we're doing right now may cause a problem with the balance of souls that Soul Society has been protecting since their existence. Urahara pulled out his fan and covered half his face. Shinigami purify hollows when they kill them with their Zanpakuto, they release all the souls that the hollow had eaten and send them all to the soul cycle. However, now that hollows are staying here in Hueco Mundo, that balance may soon break because souls are no longer joining the cycle, so more souls will leave the cycle and leave empty at the same time unless the Shinigami could start sending more souls there and to do that. Lily's eye slowly widened as she figured it out first. They have to come here since most hollows are now staying in Hueco Mundo, the Shinigami will have no choice but to figure out a way to invade Hueco Mundo to massacre hollows. That's right. Sale's smile dropped. As much as I would love to see Soul Society crumble, the balance of the worlds is a little more important. That's why we're creating these Ryatsu power stations. We soon may need to stop using the Jillians to make our food, that's also a factor in the breaking of the soul cycle, but nothing to fear since I thought of a way for us to keep getting food and not disrupt the cycle. He leans closer to the group and spreads his arms to the glass chamber in a show-off fashion. That's where my invention comes in and to show it off, I'm going to need a volunteer. He didn't wait on anyone, he already set his eyes on Ichigo. He opens the door to the glass chamber and gestures for Ichigo to come in. Ichigo got the cue that Sale wanted him to go into the chamber, but sometimes Sale's inventions tend to explode. He looks at Lily and gestures her out. Well, ladies first. Her response was more simple, she smacked him at the back of his head and started shoving him into the chamber. Don't be such a scary cat, this thing not gonna blow up. She turns to the pink-haired man and whispers. This thing isn't going to explode, right? Meh, 50/50ths. Well, that's good enough for her. See? 50 plus 50 equals 100. So you're good. That's not how that works. Ichigo yelled back absurdly, but it didn't matter as Lily did one more shove and he was already inside the glass chamber. With a sigh of defeat, Ichigo turns to Sail and glares at him. This thing better not kill me. No promises. Sail sing-song back, before looking back at the group, and Urahara set the machine up. Now then. The two things that this machine will do for us is 1, give us food with the same quality as our normal food source but in higher quantity. And last, it will return souls back into the cycle. He looks back at Ichigo to see the redhead get coated in a baby blue layer of light. Don't worry about it, Ichigo-kun, you'll feel slightly nauseous, but that's about as bad as the symptoms get. First, the machine will gather Ryatsu, and unlike the machines we use, it doesn't dematerialize the individual. Now, after that's done, the box that you see on top will absorb most of the discarded Ryatsu and leave some behind. Then after the first box closes, the second box will release the same Ryatsu that we use on our current machines, mix, and get sucked back again to the same box, and then we're done. Ichigo felt as if he was going through the stages that Sail was talking about. He felt his Ryatsu getting pulled out of his body and into the box on the wall. Then he watches as the second box on top of the chamber releases a strange gas which starts melding with his leftover Ryatsu before getting absorbed back into it. He stood there waiting for a while before hearing Sail opening the door for him to get out. He looked back at him and couldn't believe how fast and painless the process was. That was it? There's nothing more. Exactly. Sail responded enthusiastically. So where's the food and the souls? Stark asks, and the pink-haired Arrancar answers him immediately. The second box is making the food, and as for the souls. Sail gestured towards Urahara, and the blonde pressed a button on the box right next to him. It slowly started glowing before fading in an instant. You see, Stark, us Shinigami have 2 jobs to do. We kill hollows with our Zanpakuto to cleanse them of the sins they committed as a hollow so that they could pass into the afterlife. Then our second job involves sending pluses to the Soul Society with our Zanpakuto-S ability, Konso. But what we're doing right now isn't exactly like that. What we're going to do with these souls is sending them straight to the cycle, and to do that I had to get Tessai's and Hachi's help in creating a powerful Kido spell, but that still isn't enough. Urahara opened the box and pulled out a familiar-looking orb. Sending souls into the cycle isn't easy since we have to open a gate straight into it, and opening a gate to an entirely different dimension is rather difficult for a person, but like I said before, the Hogyoku is still active enough to temporarily open a gate for the souls. He puts the orb back inside, claps his hands and smiles at the group. Well, that's about it. Hopefully once the Hogyoku wakes up, we can create more Arrancar and have them volunteer to help us out. Urahara-san. Said man turned to look at Ichigo and noticed the swirls of emotions he could see in his eyes. Something you want to say, Captain Kurosaki? Ichigo's eyes shook with so much emotion as he spoke. Could this machine possibly remove only one soul inside of us? Yes, there were plenty of emotions dancing in Ichigo's eyes, but the most noticeable one was desperation. Well, Urahara looked down and thought. We could rework the machine to do just that, but that would be a waste since we can pull out more souls this way. But I mean, if you had someone in mind that you want to get rid of, it's safe to assume they're out already. Can you use regular hollows too, or does the machine work better with an Arrancar? Lily asks and glances over at Ichigo. She knew what he was talking about and she rather switched the subject for his sake. Well, Arrancar won't feel any change in their strength if a few souls get removed, a normal hollow will feel it though. Sail answered her question, and before more could be said, Ulquiorra appeared. You're late to see the show, Ulquiorra-san. Ulquiorra looks at the assembled group, then at the machine before going back to the group. I'm sure I missed nothing important. Well, I have, you know. He ignored Sail and looked at Stark. I have something very important to show you. Oh fine, just ignore me. He pulled out his left eye before crushing it in his hand. Insignificant specks of dust hover slightly over his head. Absorb some of it. He didn't need to tell Lily twice since she was already familiar with his technique, but the rest slightly looked puzzled before doing what he told them, and seconds later their eyes widened and looked at him. She's in a cell at the police division. Shall we? Sale watched everyone leave before looking back at Urahara. I honestly can't believe that it actually worked. He followed Urahara as the man walked back to the computer. I guess your lies work again, Urahara-san. You know, as a thank you gift for helping you out, do what Ichigo-kun asked for you. He taps his lips a couple of times before a wicked grin spread across them. Or instead of a thank you gift, perhaps it should be a I'm sorry that I use you as a tool for the last 4 years apologies. Urahara could feel Sale's wrongful smile sending a shiver down his spine. I'll apologize once I'm finished. Sale leans his head beside Urahara's left shoulder to see the information gathered into the computer. He smiles and turns around with a hand on his right cheek. Oh, I'm sure Stark will forgive you for lying to his face about everything, this machine, the Hogyoku. Aizen. Dropping his taunting attitude, his smile twisted into a nasty snarl and he spoke through gritted teeth. Remember our promises, Urahara-san. I could have told Stark-san everything you had done behind our backs, but your silver tongue is the only reason you're not dead. As long as I keep my lips sealed, you'll take the fall alone and will help me with my ambition, immortality. Stopping his work to look back at the pink-haired Arrancar, Urahara says, between my lies and your ambition, I can tell you, I'll regret yours more than mine. So, what can you do? Mashiro asked their unsuspected guest. Can you spit acid or something like that? Oh, how about changing colors? Wait. No, snakes can't do that, or can they? Can you shed your skin? Sun had coiled herself once the policeman of La Estrella left her in the cell with this very talkative woman. The white-skinned man that she remembered about 2 years ago had come and asked her questions before leaving a few minutes ago, and it wasn't 5 minutes later before he appeared back again with the company of Stark. She bows her head slightly out of respect. I hope you're brief about my reason for being here, Stark-sama. Oh, so now you're finally talking. Mashiro puffed her cheeks and pouted. From what I saw through Okuyora's eyes, Stark ignored Mashiro's comment and the look the Serpent Hollow sent him. I'm having a hard time believing that Haribel had asked to join us. She has been keeping her distance away from me and Berrigan, not bothering to choose sides. She has, but that's only because Haribel-sama wants to avoid your needless quarrel for the sake of the Hollows who chose to join her. So what change? Lily asked with a frown. If Haribel had been avoiding joining any sides to this war for the purpose of keeping Hollows safe, then why break her oath after 2 years when their war had spread across most of Hueco Mundo? The Vasto Lord should have made up her mind a few years back. The White Serpent's eyes moved to Lily. Berrigan's scouts are getting closer to our hideout with each passing day. She's worried that once they find us, Berrigan will come to kill her and take the Hollows to work for him as either slaves, soldiers, or perhaps both. All those choices are grim news for him. More soldiers on Berrigan's side will just mean the attacks will start becoming more frequent and they won't possibly be able to keep their food supply coming if Berrigan chooses to redo another Jillian massacre like he had done 2 years ago. Guess I don't have any choice. We can't have Berrigan kill Haribel and gain more soldiers because then they'll destroy everything we work hard for. Stark yawned and looked over to Okuyora. Pass a message to all the captains and lieutenants to keep the divisions running constantly from this point on. He looks back to Haribel's hollow and opens the cell. You're going to take me to meet Haribel. Ichigo blinks a few times as he hears about Stark's order. Wait, you're going alone, Stark. If Berrigan's scouts find Haribel and tell him, then he'll head over to her. Okuyora moved his eyes towards Ichigo's. Stark is still the only one among us that can fight. Yoruchi watches as all the Arrancar simultaneously turn their heads towards the same direction. Noticing the soft frown on Stark's lips, she says, I don't like that look on your face. Hearing the static boom of a sonido, she turns her head around to see Sail. And you shouldn't. He pushes his glasses up with the palm of his hand. Barragan and his army are marching towards us, but they seem to have suddenly stopped. It's almost as if they're waiting for something. And it doesn't take a genius to know why. Ulquiorra said, Stark's still here, and as long as he's here, then Barragan won't take another step, but if he was to leave, then they'll attack us. Lily scowled and turned her facial expression to Sung Sun. Someone followed you here and then they went back to tell Barragan. We have a problem, Ulquiorra kept adding to the bad news. I only sense a fraction of Barragan's army, the rest of them most likely are heading towards Haribel's location. Well, that doesn't sound good. Yoruchi put her right hand on her hip. But that doesn't mean we don't have a solution for it. All we have to do is send at least a few of our captains to help Haribel, while Stark and a few more stay here to make sure Barragan doesn't do anything stupid. Sounds like a plan to. Stark stopped to see Love appearing in front of them, bend over on his knees and out of breath. Stark.K We have a problem. All our remaining farms are getting attacked simultaneously by Barragan's soldiers. Some of us are doing well but a few are struggling. The Afrostar man took a long breath and said, Stark, Barragan sent that troublesome double-headed Jillian in a very, very, powerful hollow. I hate to admit it but we're having problems down there. I already went over to Kensei and Shinji for help. And the unwelcome news is getting worse. Yoruchi looked at Stark and then back to Sung Sun. But Haribel should still do just fine if some of Barragan's army headed towards her. She's still a Vastolord and she won't be fighting alone since she has many followers. Besides, as a Vastolord, the only thing that could challenge her is an Arrancar, and as far as we know, Barragan doesn't have one in his army. Or maybe he does. Lily frowned as she said, Stark, I still haven't told you about our adventure but we had a close encounter with an Arrancar and by how he greeted us, it is safe to assume he's with Barragan. Was he strong? Stark asked and Ichigo answered him. Honestly? Not really. Either of us could have easily dealt with him but he used a Zero inside the temple and the place started collapsing so we had to escape. Change of plans. Stark knows he doesn't have the time to think about it, so choices will get made rather hastily. Barragan's right outside our door and he's waiting for me to either go to Minos Park or help Tyr, but that won't do. Ichigo, Ulquiorra go down with Love and help them out. I have no choice but to say hello to him. He glances over to Sail and Yoruchi. You two are coming with me. As an intimidation act, Barragan's army still needs to understand that I'm not Lyostrella's only capable fighter. He looks at Lily, then at Ichigo. Is the Arrancar stronger than Lily? Lily instantly noticed the worried look in Ichigo's eyes and before he could say a thing, she cut in. No, I'm stronger. You don't know that, Lily. He didn't even use his resurrection. I can take him out before he does. Trust me. Convincing Lily now would be impossible. So instead, Ichigo asked for a change. Stark, let me go with Lily. Feeling a slight squeeze on his left shoulder, he turns around to see Love with an apologetic look on his face. Sorry Ichigo, but we really need you. Rose, Nell and I can't protect all the farms. At least with all of you there, we have a better chance. Then Lily should come with us then. Ichigo tried again, but Yoruchi of all people shot it down. Lily needs to go with the Hollow to help Haribel, besides, she can handle herself just fine, Ichigo. Trust me, I train her. Also, it is not like I'm sending her off alone. Stark glances at Mashiro and then back at Ichigo. I understand you have reasons to be more worried about her now, but this is part of her job. She used to get worried about you when you went off to Minos Park to fight off Barragan's army, but she knew how that was always part of your job. She also knew you'd come back. Stark put his hands inside his pockets and started walking past Ichigo before stopping behind him. Trust in my judgment and in her strength that she'll come back. Sail, give Lily and Mashiro your special Ryatsu hiding cloaks, we can't have Barragan chase after them. A sonido use later, Stark left and was soon followed by Sale and Yoruchi. Love looked at Ichigo to apologize one more time and left. Now the only remaining people were Okuiora, Ichigo, Lily, Mashiro and Sung-sun. The atmosphere left behind by Stark was tense and awkward for both Ichigo and Lily. Getting tired of it, Lily tried to get rid of the awkwardness. She lightly punched Ichigo's chest. Well, you better go off and show them what happens when they mess with the infamous Zangetsu. She tried smirking, but the action felt rather self-forced, so she dropped it and instead looked at him with a small, worried smile. Please come back safe, Ichigo. To this point and before this scene had happened to them, Ichigo would get the occasional call to help Minos Park to deal with Baragon's army usual attacks, with most times Lily been around with him to hear duty calling to him, and every time she dismissed him with a wave of her hands with a simple sentence or two such as, "Go kick their ass, better do your job or else they'll demote you, Lieutenant Kurosaki," or, the one that until this point realized how important it really meant, "Please come back safe, Ichigo." He didn't see a reason for her to always say that last one after a cheeky comment. It felt rather pointless on purpose, but now those words hit differently. Maybe because it used to be Lily's way of a subtle approach of revealing her feelings towards him. It was also perhaps their only form of trust that got used among them two that didn't involve taunting one another, but now it felt rather different. Trust was still there, but with Lily's tone and voice, it almost, no, scratch that, he heard her words sounding off like a sort of pleading promise that didn't reveal too much emotion. "I'll come back and you better come back too. That's an order from your captain." Ichigo tried to squeeze a joke into this slightly grim situation, but with how he mixed in tones of trust, plea, and promise into his voice too, and it was undoubtedly noticeable for her. He saw how her smile warmed. Emotions really feel different when relationships get involved. He stumbles a bit back as Lily leaps to wrap her arms around his neck and kiss him close to his eyes, the only area where his hollow mask wasn't covering. "Ah, now isn't this cute?" Both teens jump and turn around to see Sale smirking at them. "What the hell are you doing here? Aren't you supposed to be off with Stark?" And Lily stopped and caught the cloak that Sale had thrown to her and then one at Mashiro. "You're going to need those if you don't want Baragon or his army to chase you. Now then, how about you two?" He turns to Okuiora then at Ichigo, "Go down to Minos Park and all of you," he looks at the girls now, "go save Harabelle's life." Watching him leave, Ichigo and Lily looked at each other, nodded once and walked towards their temporary partners. "Okay, let's go save Harabelle. Come on, we better do our job." Each party left to do their respective mission. With a horrible mistake that none of them noticed. Sale appeared right behind Stark and Yoruchi, a few miles away from La Estrella. He walked towards Stark's left side. His hands were still inside his pockets with a look of boredom in his face, almost as if he had gone through this kind of situation every day. "All right, let's get this over with." Stark slowly started walking towards Baragon, who stood in front of his army with his battle axe's blades facing towards the ground and his hands resting on the flat end of the weapon. A few more steps and they stop, leaving a few meters of space between them two. "So a divide and conquer strategy, Baragon?" The only thing that Baragon did which sent a shiver down his spine was a smirk. "No, this is just a distraction." The brunette mentally cursed. Baragon has too much pride to let himself become the distraction to whatever plan he is plotting. Is he distracting us from making sure we don't go help the farms or helping Harabelle? It couldn't matter which of the two it could be. Everyone in Minos Park is strong enough to battle off Baragon's army, and with Ichigo and Okuiora helping them out, they should win in about 10 minutes. Lily and Mashiro had put on the cloaks, since he couldn't sense their Ryatsu anymore, so there's no way for Baragon or his army to go after them. There's no point in weighing up your choices now, Coyote. Because you failed the first and only move that you needed to prevent this. Stark narrows his eyes. "What the hell are you talking about, Baragon?" But the other king said nothing. Baragon turned around and tapped the air, creating a giant garganta. He hasn't done anything or given Yoruichi and Sale a signal to stop him since it was better for Berrigan to leave now without a fight, but that didn't mean he wasn't worried. Something is going on, Stark. Sale whispered towards his ears and Yoruichi nodded as she spoke her troubled thoughts too. Things shouldn't be this easy. Both of them were right, but Stark didn't see a reason to stop Berrigan. A few minutes pass before all the remaining hollows open a Garganta for them to take. This feels rather pointless. What is Berrigan plotting? Just as the last of the hollows enter their gate, Berrigan unleashes a burst of his Ryatsu. The act only lasted a second, but he heard the quiet shifting of feet beside him. He looks to his left to see Sale had taken a step back, and to his right, Yoruichi had changed her footing to charge towards the old king. He could see sweat going down her face. Looking back to Berrigan, he noticed how the old-aged Arrancar was now walking through his gate. Never trust a snake, coyote. With those final sayings, Berrigan left and Stark's non-existing heart sank. He wouldn't be talking about the hollow, right? He turns around to look at the workat, but she seems more confused and shocked than he was. Stark, do we know where the hollow would take us? She could already hear what Stark's response would be. I'm not talking about taking you towards Haribel, I'm talking about directions, a location, something that could have given us a clue to where they're going. The fact that Stark looked terrified, she cursed and turned to Sale. Please tell me you have some sort of chipping device in the cloaks. Another grave look. Crap. This is bad, that hollow was working for Berrigan. But we have seen that hollow before and it was one of Haribel's followers. Sale yelled back. Stark took his time to open a Garganta that led to Minos Park. But what if Haribel had made an alliance with Berrigan? What if they got fooled? Sale, how good is your pesquisa? He asked the man but didn't wait for an answer. I wasn't able to sense Mashiro's and Lily's Ryatsu, but I was able to sense the hollows. They were heading west. Go after them. Sale left instantly when he yelled at him and he turned around to run down through the portal with Yoruichi behind him. He couldn't believe how he let Berrigan stall them for 10 minutes by having his hollows go through a bunch of Gargantas. I made a horrible mistake. Gerald jumped back and pierced one of Berrigan's soldiers with his tail before jumping out of the way as another hollow fired a Zero towards his direction. He took a second to look around the battlefield to assist any hollow who was having trouble, but seeing as they had destroyed the machine, their hollows had left and gone to help another post or at least stayed behind and tried to cut down Berrigan's army. He moves out of the way as someone shoots him with another energy blast. Thankfully, it wasn't too hard to figure who's fighting for whom. Berrigan's soldiers reeked of murderous intent, so it was easy to tell friend from foe. We need to leave and help another group, Nell said, appearing right behind him. The Jillians we gathered are dead already and we lost the machine. He already knew that, but still, Nellio-san, it would be better if we can cut down their numbers before helping someone else. The Centaur Hollow shook her head. We can't waste our energy. Or else how are we going to help everyone else? Then at least let's help the Hollows escape. Gerald argued back. There weren't that many hollows from their side still here, only a couple of handfuls since they're helping the rest move towards another spot or go to La Estrella, but the thought of not helping these hollows and leaving them behind has been something he doesn't want to do ever again, and he has shamelessly done so. The first time happened during the Human World incident about 5 years ago. Then came the time when Berrigan marched down through the forest of Minos and killed the hollows that he promised as a guardian to keep safe. Last, there's these current moments in which time and time again he was too slow to help any hollows from getting killed. If only I was stronger. If only I was an Arrancar. He was about to rush in to help a hollow from getting killed from the back when he senses someone burst their Ryatsu to life. He looked up and found Ichigo levitating in the air. Berrigan's hollows noticed the redhead instantly. They didn't flee at the sight of him. Most wanted to kill him and take the fame by killing the infamous hollow. They all charge Zeros towards him, and Ichigo stands there calmly and reaches towards one of his hilts. They took his action as a sign to open fire. Gerald almost screamed out but caught himself. Ichigo was far stronger than he was 2 years ago, and everything about the redhead has changed. When the Zeros hit him, Gerald covered his eyes as the attack blinded everyone, but that seemed to be the only thing it did. It didn't explode in the way the attack usually would. The light started losing shine, and he looked back up to see Captain Kurosaki cover in his signature white layer armor with slow-moving red flames-like motions dancing in any visible spot across his skin, and in his hand was a dado with a black blade. Its crossguard had 4 prongs bent out to form the shape of the manji, and a short length of chain with a broken link at the end dangles from the base of the hilt. Ichigo raises his blade and scowl. "Alright, now it's my turn." He saw a spot where Baragon's soldiers were larger in numbers and swung his sword towards them. Getsuga Tensho. The blast hit and blasted everything behind the group of hollows, causing panic and chaos to break among Baragon's ranks. He lowered down to the ground and landed in front of Gerald and Nell. "Sorry about getting here late, but I had to go through a few spots before coming here." He and Ulquiorra had to take different routes as they arrived in Minos Park. Ulquiorra decided that he should help the group deal with the powerful Ryatsu they felt the moment they came, while he went around the farms to help the hollows out. If he had it his own way, then he would have tried to get rid of the double-headed Jillian, but the creature seemed to have absorbed a hollow who could hide its Ryatsu. So the only way for him to get lucky and find the Jillian was for him to go around everywhere to find him. Gerald or Nell couldn't say anything back to Ichigo as the redhead jumped in front of them to absorb a blue Zero. Ichigo looked up with wide eyes to see an Arrancar standing on top of the destroyed machine. Looking at him a bit closer, he realizes it was the same Arrancar that attacked him and Lily back at the temple. I didn't sense him until he shot his Zero. He looked at the cloak he was wearing and had a dreadful feeling that it worked the same as Sale's version. Grimmjow clicked his tongue and lowered his arm. Just like in the temple, Zangetsu easily reflected his attack. He senses Baragon burst his Ryatsu and realize it was the cue that he talked about. He tapped the air to open a gate and put his hands inside his pockets. He looked back to Zangetsu as the Garganta closed. "Before I go after Coyote and Baragon, I'll be going after you, Zangetsu. You're going to be my stepping stone." The redhead felt the quick burst of Ryatsu coming from Baragon. Is Stark and Baragon fighting? He looked around and noticed how each of Baragon's hollow had taken a Garganta. Something's off. The battlefield was now quiet and empty, with the few surviving hollows trying to comprehend why Baragon would split his army to attack every remaining factory and not have his entire army focus on attacking only one, which would cause fewer losses for them and actually get the job done. Ichigo didn't think much about it, but he wonders if Ulquiorra had gotten fast enough to help the group that was dealing with the powerful hollow. Then his mind stopped. The Arrancar I was expecting Lily to fight came here. Then does that mean Lily won't have to fight him? His mind eases a bit, knowing now that Lily couldn't possibly be in danger, but then his mind wonders why the Arrancar would be here and not possibly after Harabel. He couldn't think too much about it before Stark and Yoruchi appeared. Stark scanned his surroundings, and soon as he saw Ichigo, he called out to him. "Ichigo! Please tell me you know where Lily and Mashiro went." Ichigo's stomach dropped. "What are you talking about, Stark?" "They went to help Harabel." "Ichigo! We're talking about directions. Anything that gives us a hint to where they went." Yoruchi yelled at him, but as Ichigo dropped his Zanpakuto, she cursed and looked at Stark. "Our only hope now is Ulquiorra." The redhead didn't ask questions back. He followed them as they rushed towards Ulquiorra's Ryatsu. Ulquiorra arrived at the scene with a frown on his face as he witnessed the destruction a single hollow had done, with everything destroyed and no single soul in sight. This is rather troublesome. Already witnessing the destruction, his eyes searched for the hollow responsible for it, and it didn't take long to find him. The creature was standing on the wreckage of the factory and looking mighty proud of himself. The hollow was rather powerful, and without doubt in Ulquiorra's mind, it was easily a Vastolord. Like most hollows of his level, he appeared humane but was rather abnormally tall for a Vastolord, standing almost 7 feet 6 inches 1/2 inch, with a powerful build and a thin ponytail reaching his upper back. Multiple horns sprout from its mask, with some covering his lower jaw, and crack-like markings frame his eyes. Arms position in a knuckle-walk position, and its legs seemed rather hairy, ending in short, stubby bone-like toes, giving the hollow an ape-like appearance. Where the hell are you, Phantasma? Besides the fact that this hollow was an obvious threat, something deep within his soul told Ulquiorra that this hollow would become a problem for him, and the thing was, he felt threatened by this hollow. He wasn't thinking about Stark, Ichigo, or the safety of La Estrella, it was him. He felt threatened by the hollow. He decided instantly, he needed to get rid of this hollow. He fires a powerful Zero, no warning, no making himself known. The hollow covered its eyes as the light blinded him. With everything destroyed and everyone dead, he didn't hold back, and he had hoped it would have been enough, but he could still feel the hollow's presence. Worrisome. The smoke cleared and the hollow looked unscratched. Very worrisome. Come down here, you little dumbass. The hollow rage and his Ryatsu burst. Scowling, Ulquiorra couldn't help but feel as if he knew who this hollow was. In close, Murcielago. Seconds after Resurrection, Ulquiorra was already soaring towards the Vasto Lord with a green energy javelin in his hands. He was going in for a quick kill by beheading him. He was expecting for the hollow to not react in time, but it proved him wrong when the hollow was able to follow him even in his release form. Are you trying to piss me off, you little shit? Another burst and Ulquiorra felt as if it pushed him back. You're not even who I. The hollow stopped and looked at him more closely before a feral grin spread across its mask. Que suerte. You're the little shit that was helping Phantasma. Ulquiorra seemed slightly confused for a second before remembering the one and only time he helped Stark. I see. He nodded and looked at the hollow more closely now. You used to be that towering hollow that Stark would have killed to feed Ichigo and Lily. Seems like you have grown into a Vasto Lord. The response didn't sit well with the hollow since its grin dropped and started growling at him before stopping and laughing maniacally. You're not the person I'm trying to kill, but I sure as hell want to beat the shit out of you now. The green-eyed Arrancar scoffed and soared back to the Vasto Lord. Seeing a low swing coming from his left, Ulquiorra moved right behind him with a sonido and his Luz de la Luna closing in on the hollow's neck. It was supposed to end in a second. He didn't slow down or hold back, but the hollow swung his body around and punched him across his cheek. Such strength. Ulquiorra tries to resist the force behind the attack, but the hollow proves to be in a different league to any Vasto Lord. When the punch threw him back, he tried to regain his equilibrium back but couldn't in time as he crashed through an enormous boulder. He pushed himself up and held onto a stone to stand up. Sensing the hollow creating a Zero, he looked up, created another one of his energy javelins and threw it before the hollow could fire it. With both attacks mixing and exploding on impact so close to the Vasto Lord, Ulquiorra was hoping to see the hollow at least winded up, but it seemed to have tanked the explosion instead. Kill the hollow, he's too dangerous, he will hurt us. Ulquiorra's eyes widened as a voice spoke through his head and lost focus in his fight for a second before he senses Barragan's Ryatsu. He looked up and then back to the Vasto Lord as he heard the loud clicking of his tongue. And here I was hoping I could kick your ass a little longer. Yami turned around and opened a garganta. He may be powerful now, but even he knows that Barragan will put him in his place if he steps out of the line. He looked back at the Arrancar and scowled. Next time you're not going to be so lucky. Ulquiorra didn't think luck was on his side. He still had plenty of stamina and strength left to keep fighting the hollow. All it would have come down to is who would put the first lethal blow on their opponents. He didn't respond to the hollow's words and sealed back his resurrection. His regeneration kicked in and he found all minor bruises and scratches heal instantly. The Vasto Lord may have been strong with an impressive Ryatsu, but truthfully that wasn't what he was worried about. Forgetting his problems, Ulquiorra turned around as he sensed Stark coming towards his direction with the Wercat and the redhead behind him. Something isn't right. When Stark showed up, his hands were slightly shaking and sweating. Okiura, he stopped to take in a sharp breath. Please tell me you know where Mashiro and Lily were heading. When Okiura shook his head, he sighs and drops his shoulders and head. Ichigo, Okiura. I sent sail towards the west, the direction the hollow was taking Lily and Mashiro to help Harabel. This entire thing was a setup. He looked up to see a slightly widened Okiura and a shocked Ichigo. They left without another word and Stark didn't flinch as the wind caused by their sonido picked up some sand that breezed across his face and deep inside him, he felt as Anna's heart broke. Yo, so this isn't the part where I leave an A/N and such, nope. What we're gonna have here is a, omake, meaning bonus or extra chapter that I had wanted to post about 4 chapters back but held back in doing so. About what you may think. Well, it's about a pairing that may get labeled as a crack ship, but honestly, I wanted to give it a shot at it. Also, the reason I wouldn't have these scenes across the story is 'cause I didn't want to focus on them. That's enough about that. Omake. Set between chapter 10 and 11. A Bat's Diary, I. He was standing on a boulder overlooking the area. Not bored. Not tired. Not analyzing Stark's training. Not talking. Not communicating with the sizable man that had his eyes closed and focusing. He's just there, standing and doing nothing. Like he always has been doing. A week had passed since he joined the bizarre group of colorful individuals, and he wasn't just talking about the hollows. He was referring to the Shinigami and the Vizards. They were all a bunch of oddballs. Specifically the boy, Ichigo, had made a ridiculous promise to help him be able to share his thoughts and feelings with others, but little did the boy know that he had lived his life filled with nothing, emptiness. How can he share anything with anyone when there's nothing in him? Also, it doesn't help that no one seems to want to know anything about him. Everyone just seems to always be on high alert when he gets near any of them. Always. He looks down at the man who seems like he was meditating. He stepped down and moved a little closer towards him, but then his eyes shot open and looked at him with a sharp, hard look in his eyes, threatening him to not step any closer to his boundaries. He looks back into the man's eyes, not challenging him, but trying to understand why he is treating him this way. Then, the biggest oddball interrupted their little eye standoff. Hachi. Don't look at him with such a scary face. He won't be your friend if you keep looking at him with that. Mashiro, the loud and childishly energetic woman. Where did she even come from? Look at him. He's trying to talk to you, but you're scaring him. He notices that at the moment Hachi looked bashful at being the center of attention to the only 2 people around him. Yes, well, the large man pointed at his mask. I'm not sure how he will talk to me when he doesn't have a mouth. Are you discriminating against him? Do you even know what that word means, Mashiro-san? The woman pout before releasing a long and whining sound. He does nothing besides moving his eyes left to right as they talk back to one another before he stops and stays watching Mashiro. The woman was really odd. Even by normal standards she was odder than any normal person could be, and he only thinks that because she's the only adult that comes to find him. Not to see what he was doing, but to see if he wanted to talk. So maybe she wasn't odd, just curious about him, and he'll be lying too if he told himself he wasn't either. Out of all the adults, well, those who weren't hollows, she seems to neither keep their distance away from him or, as Hachi had shown, always on guard if he gets too close to her. He moves closer to her side and already he could see the man's body tensing up, while on the other hand Mashiro turned around to look at him before a smile broke across her face. See Hachi. All he wants to do is talk to someone, right big guy? Of course she would think that even though he only stood 6 inches taller than her. He tilts his head to the side, and she follows suit but with a goofy and confused expression on her face. He could nod back to her by guessing his thoughts. He at least knows that much, but it'll be better if he shows her how right she was, right? He raises his hand to pat her head, a simple praising action for guessing his thoughts. Just as his hand hovered slightly above her head. A strange transparent, maroon-like cube encased it, and then in a second his hand vanished. Mashiro gasps and they both turn to look at Hachi with his hand clapped together. At first the man had a hard glare and scowl on his face, but as he notices his mistake, he quickly started apologizing to him, but his words were going through deaf ears right now. He held up his severed arm up high and narrowed down his eyes. He feels something, not pain though. There was a strange numbness at first before goosebumps ran down along his arm, and then he felt the sensation of something growing. He watched as green energy sprouted from his severed arm before it took the form of a hand. Then it slowly changes into bones, then muscles before white skin covers everything again. Instant regeneration. Hachi sighed out loud and bowed his head down. I'm terribly sorry for my intentions, Hollow-san, I thought you were trying to hurt Mashiro. The green-haired woman had puffed her cheeks as she was throwing a tantrum at Hachi and flailing her arms above her head. Hachi, you can't just send people's hands into another dimension like that. I already apologized to him, Mashiro-san. At his words she stopped, pouted and turned around to look at him. You're okay, right? Nothing hurts. He shook his head. She looks at her friend and bit her lips. Are you mad at him? To that answer, he hesitated. Was he mad? What reaction or emotion is there to be when you're mad at someone? Rage? Anger? He felt nothing like that. He got caught off guard, and he won't deny it. However, it wasn't like he didn't expect it to happen. Everyone was already on edge when he was around them. Honestly, it feels as though everyone is waiting for him to cross the safe line so that they had a reason for killing him, and dying was rather something he wasn't so eager to experience. He shook his head and the corners of Mashiro's mouth turned down. Was his response not good enough for her? There was no anger, pain or any other emotion. Her frown soon turned to a thin, concentrated line, and he could tell that the woman had a different question for him. Were you alone? She asked him softly, and there was something about the way she said it that made him remember. As a hollow, he felt alone in the world, being white while those around him were black. He felt like an outsider even though he was a hollow, like them. He wandered Hueco Mundo alone, lamenting his existence. Alone all the time, always feeling empty. He's curious to know how she knew a feeling that he couldn't share with her. He nodded back slowly at her and a small, sad smile formed on her lips. Lily told me about a mental breakdown a hollow gets after a certain time. For her and Stark, it was feeling alone. Even though they had each other, they always wanted to have friends but couldn't 'cause everyone died around them. Her eyes seemed to read his soul as she said, you were alone too, but not like them. You didn't have anyone to share the same feelings as you. That's why you don't know how to express yourself, right? Because you didn't have anyone to talk to. She hit something inside of him, he could just feel it. It was a fizzy feeling that he couldn't name, but she somehow was able to pull it out of him. Which one? Which emotion did she make him feel? He couldn't ask her as Shinji walked up to the group and called the Vizards out, saying that they're done for the day so they get to go home now. Hachi sighed again, no doubt happy that someone had come to save him. Yash. Time to go, Mashiro looked at him with her usual smile back on her face. Bye-bye. He watched her wave goodbye to him when Ichigo came up and started dragging him by his regrown hand. Come on, Ni-san. I'm done with my training so now I can help you. That's right. He picked up his pace and started dragging Ichigo instead, eager to learn. Hopefully, next time he'll be able to talk with her. Yes, his curiosity about her has peaked.